Good morning, everybody. Those who are here in the room with us and those who are following us on Facebook and on YouTube. It's been a great day yesterday. It's going to be an even better day today because the subjects, the matters that we want to discuss, that we are going to discuss, are of high relevance, and because a lot of events are happening as we speak. So a lot of items to be discussed, a lot of good experts, a lot of good speakers to be listened to today as well, and a lot of good questions, I hope, are going to be asked. It is my pleasure and honor once again to open the second day of the forum, introducing the person who has been the engine of this forum when it first started 10 years ago, who has been the brain behind many of the panels and many of the items and many of the issues which are being discussed and have been discussed at the forum, and who now has a much higher task on his shoulders, hence he cannot be here with us today, but still has sent us a message which I hope will help us understand what's going on in the world and what is going to happen in the world, or at least what some people would like to see happening in the world. It is my extinguished pleasure and honor to introduce Mr. Mircea Joană, the Deputy Secretary General of NATO.
Bună dimineața, good morning. Such a privilege to virtually participate to the 10th edition of the Bucharest Forum, and also to celebrate together the 15th anniversary of the Aspen Institute Romania. You know how much the Institute and the Bucharest Forum are close to my heart, and I'm so happy that yesterday Secretary General Stoltenberg opened this great event hosted in the capital city of Romania. For 15 years, the Aspen Institute has been true to our mission to foster value-based leadership and to promote a profound conversation on the dominant issues confronting the good society. In 15 years, more than 1,000 fellows and alumni from Romania, from more than 20 other countries, always encouraging a educated conversation about things that are so complex and so sometimes difficult to grasp. So congratulations to the Aspen Institute, to the German Marshall Fund, Bucharest office, and to my friends and colleagues from the Aspen Institute. Thank you so much for everything you do. I'm also very happy that alongside our Secretary General and myself, we'll also have other colleagues from NATO participating in the Bucharest Forum. Barbara Braje, our Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy, Benedetta, running the policy unit here at NATO. Also very happy to see that commissioners and friends like Executive Vice President Dombrovskis, Vice President Šefčovič, of course, Commissioner Vălean, the State Department, and many others do participate. And let me say one word about the Bucharest Forum. What I'm happy about this forum, which is unique in a way, is that it's not only Romania or region-centered or focused. It takes a much broader perspective. It looks at the intersection between strategy, security, and economy and technology. It's looking, of course, to the southeast part of Europe, to the Black Sea region, but it's also looking to the articulation between Europe, North America, and the Asia-Pacific. And this edition of the Bucharest Forum is true to the tradition of making sure that we have a broad, comprehensive view of the world. And also there is a happy coincidence, in a way, that the Bucharest Forum, organized on the 9th and the 10th of December, does coincide with what President Biden and the US administration have been organizing on the exact same dates, the Democracy Summit. And quoting President Biden, democracy doesn't happen by accident. We have to defend it, fight for it, strengthen it, renew it. And as Jens Stoltenberg said yesterday in the opening of the forum, and I quote from Jens, "Today, authoritarian powers are openly undermining global rules to increase their power and influence." So I'm so happy that the great theme for the Bucharest Forum in 2021 is focused on resilience, on digital and green revolutions, in fact, a revolution in world affairs. A true revolution in which in the economy, our societies, our security, and the global competition is being transformed. And by the way, the pandemic, which is so much on our minds and is putting so much strain on our societies and our people, on our institutions, the pandemic is just an element of this transformative cocktail, an expression of the twists and turns of history and also of human evolution. And let me say from the very upfront that a strong, resilient society is the first line of defense. Military, security, NATO, European Union, they are very important in this. But the first line of defense is a strong, resilient, democratic society. And this is something that we always have to keep in mind. Also, a digital society is the only way in which we, as part of the political West, we are supposed to keep our technological edge, which is for the first time in decades and probably centuries contested by very, very aggressive and sometimes very assertive competitors. In a green society. And this is the moral compass of our generation, and this is something that unites us all over the world, irrespective of the country, the continent, or the political system we embrace. So basically, this is a conversation about the organizing principle of human society and world affairs in the 21st and probably the next centuries. And this is why the power of ideas, the values on which NATO and European Union are founded, liberty, democracy, rule of law, transparency, resilience, deterrence and defense, permanent adaptation, this is exactly what we need at this very complex and important time in human history. And this is also what NATO has in our DNA. From our inception in 1949, 72 years ago, permanent adaptation to an ever-changing strategic environment. This is what we do, and this is what will be encapsulated in the new strategic concept that our leaders in Madrid in June 2022 will be adopting, and we are working as we speak on this very important strategic document that we have here in NATO. So yes, resilience, digital and green are also very present in what NATO does. Secretary General Stoltenberg told you a few things yesterday. Let me say again that on resilience, we have started our work in 2016. And I'm happy to see that Romania and Bucharest will be hosting the Center for Euro-Atlantic Resilience. And I'm encouraging all of us to make sure that we put this important endeavor to work. I'm also very happy that NATO has embarked very seriously in the last few years, but now we're accelerating on what we call green defense and the implications for security of climate change. This is something which is an important work and will be leading this work on the way to Madrid and beyond. We're also working on a digital NATO. As you know, I'm chairing the Innovation Board in NATO. Every day we discuss and we adapt to this huge transformation also in warfare and security, that this revolution of technologies, of a speed and a depth and a breadth unprecedented in human history, are imposing for us to adapt. From artificial intelligence and big data, from biotechnology to space, from human enhancement to new materials. This is work that NATO is in the forefront of innovation, and I'm also very happy to work together with the European Union in complementarity, and I'm happy that the Bucharest Forum is addressing both the strategic concept in NATO and strategic compass in the EU. They need to be convergent and complementary in everything we do. I also commend Romania for having been selected to host the European Cyber Competence Center. So look at resilience, look at cyber. I think it's a wonderful profile that together with the innovation ecosystem all around NATO and the EU, I think Romania can and will do a much better job in being a competitive, innovative, and transformative economy and society. Let me also say a few words about NATO's partnerships. Of course, all of us are concerned about the situation and the Russian aggressive posture in and around Ukraine. And we are taking measures to mitigate and deter that. We are also looking into NATO's partnerships with countries like Ukraine, like Georgia, Moldova. And these are important partnerships for us. We are also looking very much into the Western Balkans. And our foreign ministers in Riga, just a few days ago, they looked into this issue. We are also looking to the broader Black Sea region, which has become a place of intense geopolitical competition. And we are taking measures, active measures, as we speak, to make sure that deterrence and defense and resilience in the Black Sea region, in the three little NATO allies of Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, but also with our very close partners in Ukraine and Georgia, we do together an important work to keep the Black Sea safe, open for freedom of navigation, and also a place where people, ideas, and businesses can flourish and not be blocked by geopolitical tensions. I'm also very much happy to see that the Bucharest Forum, in the tradition of the Forum, you're also discussing not only about Europe, not only about transatlantic things, not only about NATO, European Union, or the region that I just mentioned, but you also take a much broader view of the world. And the discussion on Asia-Pacific, where NATO has a wonderful, dynamic, and very mutually reinforcing partnership with the four Asia-Pacific partners of ours, of Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea. It's a very important topic, and I encourage also people in that part of Europe, in our part of Europe, to look, of course, to our continent, to look, of course, to our neighborhoods, from the south to the north, to the east, to the west, but also to look to this global geography and this very important dynamic and shift in global balance of power. NATO is and will remain a regional organization. That's what the Washington Treaty indicates very clearly. But many of the threats, many of the challenges, many of the competition is still continuing to come from our part of Europe, from the east, from the south, from the north. But also many of these threats are transnational, are non-geographic by definition, of cyber, of hybrid, disinformation, space, competition in novel systems of missiles and weaponry. These are things that need to be tackled globally, while keeping, of course, at heart the sacred mission to keep 1 billion people from 30 nations, allied nations, safe. And that's the sacrosanct Article 5, which is the uniqueness of our alliance, the most successful alliance in human history. So I congratulate my friends and my colleagues from the Aspen Institute, from GMF. I'm also very happy to see the new Prime Minister of Romania, Prime Minister Ciucă. Best of luck. You're taking the helm of the country and the government in a very complex moment. We know that your experience in defense and security will help you. And together with the rest of the leadership, irrespective of the political affiliation, we have the obligation to invest in our Western anchors in NATO, in the EU, and make sure that our interests and also our aspirations are met successfully. The best of luck. I'm so proud of you, my friends. I'm happy that I can speak to you. I'm a little bit sad that I'm not able to be with you physically there, but we'll catch up. And you know my deep, deep affection for the Aspen Institute and everything we do together. Best of luck. Felicitări, Aspen Romania. Felicitări, Bucharest Forum. Mulți, mulți ani de muncă, de succes și de impact în societate, în Europa și în lume.
I will start with the end. It is my pleasure to introduce the message of the Prime Minister of Romania. But I cannot abstain of making some remarks first. Like 17 years ago, at the initiative of Mircea, three of us, we started to negotiate in Aspen, Colorado, Romania becoming a member of the Aspen Institute's network. It was an unbelievable dream, and it was considered as impossible. Why Romania? Why there? why. And we have gone through all these whys meanwhile, and we managed to build what we have after 15 years, at the 15th anniversary, an institute which not only that it's recognized internationally, but who manage and help Aspen International to create a very powerful network of institutes all over the world, and mainly in Europe. On the other hand, with Bucharest Forum, we finally managed to create a forum of debates in this region, which was very much needed. Looking back, I can say that Aspen was one of the most rewarding projects in which I was involved in my life, and probably in many other lives. So we wish us success to continue in the next 50 years, at least in the same path. And again, allow me to introduce the Prime Minister of Romania, the message of the Prime Minister of Romania. Thank you very much.
Domnule secretar general adjunct al NATO, domnule președinte al Camerei Deputaților, doamnelor și domnilor distinși invitați, mulțumesc pentru invitația de a participa astăzi la lansarea dezbaterii despre democrație, securitate și reziliență. Este o alegere foarte bună a Institutului Aspen de a discuta aici despre reziliență democratică și securitate societală. Salut totodată preocuparea pentru aceste teme la nivelul societății civile și al experților, cu atât mai mult cu cât consolidarea democrației este un subiect constant de preocupare pentru guvernanți și decidenți politici. M-am întrebat adesea ce face ca anumite societăți să alunece pe pante antidemocratice și naționaliste și ce măsuri trebuie să fie adoptate pentru a evita asemenea deznodăminte negative în societatea românească. Și cred că primul răspuns vine din respectul pentru alegerile cetățenilor și pentru nevoile lor. Se vorbește despre faptul că autocrațiile și nu democrațiile ar fi mai eficiente în a răspunde crizelor. Realitatea a contrazis aceste afirmații, care sunt îmbrățișate și de unii reprezentanți din zona academică a statelor democratice. Democrațiile au rezistat mai bine și au ieșit mai bine din crize decât statele cu regimuri autoritare, care au părut mai viguroase și puternice în primele momente ale unei crize, dar au pierdut ulterior din cauza absenței unei susțineri a populației. Reziliența democrației este direct legată de securitatea societală a unei țări, care pune pe primul loc interesul cetățenilor, viața lor, proprietatea, drepturile și libertățile și primatul opțiunilor fiecăruia în parte. Democrațiile sunt de fapt cele care oferă cele mai solide și acceptabile soluții, care sunt susținute de către toți cetățenii. Iar reziliența democratică nu se poate obține decât atunci când reunim eforturile statului, ale societății și ale fiecărui cetățean. Dar pentru a avea susținerea societăților și a cetățeanului, este nevoie de încrederea cetățenilor în cei ajunși în funcții publice, aleși sau numiți. Capacitatea societăților de a fi reziliente în condiții de crize multiple este afectată de tranzițiile post-criză sau post-conflict nepotrivite sau haotice, corupția și capturarea politică sau oligarhică a statelor, inegalitatea, migrația, crizele de reprezentare, renunțarea la reforme și pași înapoi de la angajamentele democratice. În toate aceste cazuri sunt alterate principiile și valorile democrației, drepturile și libertățile individuale. Acestea ajung subordonate unor ipotetice drepturi ale comunității, națiunii sau statelor, sub care se ascund de fapt dorințe dictatoriale, autoritare sau liberale, preeminența intereselor personale ale unui lider, grup politic sau partid unic. Pentru a face față actualelor crize, avem nevoie de responsabilizarea autorităților în fața cetățenilor, transparență și integritate, tranziții inclusive, angajarea cetățenească, incluziune socială și politică, respectiv accesul egal la resurse și oportunități economice ale tuturor cetățenilor. Dar poate cea mai importantă metodă de acțiune rămâne cea care privește direct autoritatea în statele democratice, guvernarea și pe decidenții aflați în funcții publice. Echilibrul, nuanțele, decența în actul de guvernare, ca și respectul pentru opiniile tuturor membrilor societății, reprezintă în fapt prima condiție a susținerii deciziilor de către cetățeni. Așa se poate obține coeziunea societății și menținerea neștirbită a valorilor democratice chiar și în cele mai grele condiții de criză. Doamnelor și domnilor, în calitate de prim-ministru al României, mă ghidez alături de ceilalți colegi ai mei aflați în funcții de demnitate publică de aceste soluții, principii și elemente ale creșterii rezilienței democratice. Vă doresc succes în dezbateri și aștept cu interes să văd noile idei care pot consolida o guvernare democratică și responsabilă. Vă mulțumesc!
A very important objective of the Bucharest Forum every year has been not only to put on stage experts, officials, and wonderful speakers who talk about very hot, very important themes and problems, but also to make sure that their analysis, their suggestions are being heard by the governments in the region and especially by the government in this country. And we have been lucky to have the support of all the governments throughout the 10 years for organizing this forum, for putting it together, and for their presence, be it virtual or in person, at each of our editions. I don't know, I'm not sure if our analysis and our suggestions have been necessarily embraced, but they have definitely been heard. And that brings us a lot of pleasure to keep going on and to bring even more experts and even more items, even more problems to the fore next year and the years to follow. It is hence with pleasure that I announce the message of yet another important official of Romania, the President of Chamber of Deputies, Marcel Ciolacu, and the message is going to be read by the Vice President of the Chamber of Deputies, Ana Cătăuță.
Thank you so much, Alina. Thank you so much, Mr. Bogonaro. Before reading the message of the President of the Chamber of Deputies, let me just say how lucky I've been in the last 11 years to be a fellow of the Aspen Institute Romania. It has helped me have a wider view on the world, and I'm very proud to be also a close friend to the Institute. Din păcate, domnul președinte nu a putut ajunge și își cere scuze pentru acest lucru și îmi revine mie plăcerea de a da citire mesajului dânsului. Doamnelor și domnilor, stimați invitați, în primul rând vreau să vă urez un călduros bine ați venit la Palatul Parlamentului. Aș dori să felicit Institutul Aspen România și biroul din București al German Marshall Fund pentru organizarea celei de-a 10-a ediții a Bucharest Forum. Mă bucur că anul acesta Camera Deputaților este partener instituțional al acestui eveniment, ce pune România pe harta dialogului de anvergură regională și internațională. Tema de anul acesta, una legată de cele două revoluții pe care le traversăm, cea digitală și cea verde, reprezintă un bun prilej de a analiza implicațiile și efectele competiției globale în domenii precum tehnologie, securitate, economie, valori umane și societate. Este din ce în ce mai evident faptul că modelele economice și sociale din întreaga lume vor trebui să răspundă noilor obiective climatice din ce în ce mai ambițioase pentru a rămâne competitive și sustenabile. Statele ce reușesc să se adapteze la această nouă paradigmă vor fi viitorii poli de influență pe scena mondială. Totodată, trebuie să ținem cont de faptul că tranziția digitală și inovațiile tehnologice au și un impact major asupra industriilor și perturbă modelele de operare existente. Și din aceste motive, România trebuie să joace un rol și mai activ în conversațiile existente la nivel european și regional, mai ales că avem o vastă expertiză în ambele domenii. Pe de altă parte, criza energetică pe care o traversăm, ce s-a suprapus peste cea medicală, ne-a arătat cât de important este să avem un mix energetic capabil să răspundă cu succes la toate provocările și evoluțiile din plan european. Nu este suficient să avem potențial, trebuie ca el să fie pus în folosul românilor. Iar pentru ca acest lucru să se întâmple, trebuie să investim în tehnologii moderne și sustenabile, capabile să ajute România să fie păzită în situații de fluctuații globale. Cum în orice criză există și o oportunitate, cred că România are astăzi șansa de a face un pas important către adaptarea la noile realități ce ne înconjoară. Ca președinte al Camerei Deputaților și ca președinte al principalului partid aflat la guvernare, sunt extrem de preocupat ca România să fie un beneficiar real al transformărilor economice și geopolitice cauzate de aceste evoluții, cea digitală și cea verde. Mai mult, un alt domeniu în care România are o vastă expertiză este cel al rezilienței societale și instituționale. În acest sens, mă bucur că s-a înființat la București Centrul Euro-Atlantic pentru Reziliență, care își propune să fie un hub de expertiză națională și internațională în acest domeniu. România are, astfel, ocazia să devină exportator de expertiză către partenerii noștri din Uniunea Europeană și din NATO. În încheiere, vreau să vă asigur că voi rămâne un susținător ferm al acestor inițiative, ce arată că România este un vector de stabilitate și progres în regiunea extinsă a Mării Negre. Și sper ca anul viitor să ne revedem tot la Palatul Parlamentului în condiții pandemice mai puțin apăsătoare. Urez succes vorbitorilor și moderatorilor de astăzi și aștept cu interes să citesc concluziile acestor discuții. Vă mulțumesc foarte mult. Thank you so much also and have a great day of discussions.
Good morning. Good morning, I'm Terry Martin. Great to be back at the Bucharest Forum. Wish I could be with you there in person, but pandemic conditions being what they are, I am joining you from the comfort of my home office here in Berlin. It's my great honor to moderate the opening session this morning. Our focus over the next 50 minutes, democracy, security, and resilience. Big topic indeed. We'll be talking about the current state of democracy, challenges to it, and measures needed to preserve and strengthen it, i.e. resilience. We'll be looking at the transatlantic space, Europe in general, and perhaps developments in Central and Eastern Europe in particular. By the way, I'm an international TV news anchor based in Berlin, but I am by far the least important person you're going to see this morning. We have some outstanding guests here with us to explore our topic, which we're going to do in two parts. First, we'll hear introductory remarks from two very distinguished speakers. The second part will be a moderated discussion with two other outstanding guests. We will wrap up at 11:15 Bucharest time if we stay on track. We're getting started a little bit later than planned, but that's okay. But let's do indeed get started. Our first speaker is Maros Šefčovič, the Vice President for Interinstitutional Relations and Foresight at the European Commission. He's delivering his remarks by a recorded message which he made for us earlier.
It is a pleasure to be talking to you today alongside my good friend Mircea Joana, together with the colleagues of the Aspen Institute Romania and the Bucharest office of the German Marshall Fund of the US. Last May at the Black Sea Security Forum, we discussed democratic security and resilience in the era of great power competition, drawing lessons on NATO-EU cooperation in a post-pandemic world. Since then, delivering on our strategic foresight agenda, we have further developed our forward-looking thinking on Europe's resilience and democracy. Last September, our second strategic foresight report focused on the geopolitical dimension of resilience. We asked ourselves what it means to take the EU's open strategic autonomy and global leadership to the next level in an increasingly multipolar global order. In particular, we looked at 4 major global megatrends that will shape the world of tomorrow. Among these megatrends is the pressure on democracy and values. The 2021 VDEM report depicts a worrying situation. 68% of the world's population is already living in autocracies. Moreover, a third of people reside in states where democracy is declining, with only 4% in countries that are becoming more democratic. In addition, large-scale disinformation powered by new tools and online platforms poses an increasing risk to democratic systems, driving a new type of information warfare. It could impact our economies, damaging our companies' reputation and profitability, and even influencing financial markets. In the light of these challenges and faced with the rising relevance of hybrid threats, we need to take action. That is why, in the context of these megatrends, our report identified 10 concrete areas of action to boost Europe's open strategic autonomy, which will inform future Commission's initiatives. The last one of these actions is a call to strengthen the resilience of our public institutions in 3 ways. First, by boosting participatory and inclusive governance to enhance trust and legitimacy at all levels. New forms of participatory democracy, new technologies, civic participation and grassroots innovation, as in the Conference on the Future of Europe, can enhance political participation and strengthen the resilience of our democratic systems. Second, by countering disinformation and ensuring freedom of expression. Partnerships with like-minded public and private actors around the world will be vital in ensuring a more robust and effective response. Here, once again, the transatlantic partnership remains crucial for the upkeep of the international rules-based democratic order. Third, by relying on horizon scanning and foresight for improving situational awareness. Detecting early signs of change affecting our risk landscape is crucial to identify and expand our resilience options. President von der Leyen touched upon this latter point in her State of the Union speech in September, where she called for the EU to consider its own joint situational awareness center. Therefore, I am committed to establishing a fully fledged horizon scanning capacity in the Commission, pooling the know-how and expertise of all the institutions involved in ASPAS, our interinstitutional foresight network. Last week, we also released our resilience dashboards, a new tool allowing member states to monitor resilience in a holistic manner across 4 dimensions: social and economic, green, digital, and geopolitical. This tool covers key dimensions of democratic resilience, like disinformation, and allows a novel comparison of the EU's performance with that of third countries. Let me conclude by reiterating that our work on building the resilience of our democracies must be a joint effort. With the help of strategic foresight and horizon scanning, the EU will further build its capacities to counter autocratic tendencies and act as a credible global actor, reliable security provider, and trustworthy partner. In this context, NATO has always been a vital partner for the EU in ensuring peace and stability in Europe. In the light of the current threats to democracy, close cooperation between us is more needed than ever. Thank you.
Maros Šefčovič there, emphasizing the importance of democratic resilience and giving us some insights into how the European Commission is approaching that. Very interesting point he made there about the statistics on people living in autocracies. 68% of people in the world living in autocracies, and a third living in democracies that are declining. So I think we have plenty to talk about in those respects. So it's my pleasure to introduce our second speaker this morning. He also has prepared a video message just for this forum. Miguel Berger is State Secretary of the German Federal Foreign Office.
Dear State Secretary Badea, dear Director Inaye, but also dear Vice President of the Commission, Mr. Šefčovič, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored by the opportunity to deliver introductory remarks at today's 10th anniversary edition of the Bucharest Forum. This forum couldn't take place at a more relevant time, a time where we, regrettably, have to get used to disinformation against democratic institutions and processes, where we witness the cynical instrumentalization of refugees and migrants at the border of Belarus, continuous protests in our countries against state corona measures, which are fueled by outside media like Sputnik or Russia Today, the rise of extremist political parties in Europe. All these developments challenge democracy and resilience, and many of them have one thing in common. We have citizens who feel that their concerns are not taken seriously enough. We do not see sufficient opportunity for co-decision procedures, participation, and co-determination in their communities. Some might wrongly feel deprived of their personal freedom. All these developments show that democracy and our values are not uncontested today. Ladies and gentlemen, in order for democracy to successfully overcome these challenges and to emerge even stronger, its resilience against extremism and global spillover effects, including hate speech, must be strengthened. To this end, I would like to particularly stress the crucial importance of rule of law. Democracy, rule of law, and the guarantee of fundamental rights are three pillars forming the bedrock of the European Union. They cannot exist without one another, even less used against one another. They apply to all other policies. Challenging rule of law, the European Court of Justice, or the European Court of Human Rights goes therefore to the heart of the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, the rule of law is the solid foundation for and the strong shield of all other rights, privileges, and duties that we all enjoy in the European Union. Unfortunately, even a solid foundation can crack. When this happens, it is our common responsibility to act. The EU Treaty provides certain limited measures and assigns the Commission as guardian of the treaty. Measures like the so-called Article 7 procedure, infringement procedures, or the general regime of conditionality for the protection of the EU budget, better known as conditionality regulation, are painful but necessary. After all, respect for the rule of law is also key for the sound financial management of the Union budget and the effective use of the funding. However, while we have no doubts about the necessity of such tools and their application, it is equally important to look for ways that prevent developments that might end up in confrontations. Therefore, during the German Council presidency, we created a format together with the Commission to foster our understanding of rule of law in a constructive and positive way. Thanks to the annual Rule of Law report of the Commission and with a view to best practices in the Council, we have the opportunity to discuss everything from justice systems to institutional checks and balances, from media freedom to the fight against corruption. What is truly special about this dialogue, that together we take a very close look at the specific rule of law situation in each member state. In this dialogue, member states have the equal opportunity to voice their assessment in opinion in a fair and open discussion among partners. We want to move now to a next step with concrete recommendations by the Commission in the upcoming next report. Ladies and gentlemen, rule of law must not remain an abstract term. Our citizens must be enabled to understand, foster, and help improve it. The Conference on the Future of Europe engages citizens in an intense dialogue, jointly discussing our vision of a union that continues to offer freedom, security, and opportunity for its citizens. In this forum also the future of our democracy, common European values, and the rule of law are being addressed. We attach great importance to these discussions and stand ready to consider the outcome of the conference in our future actions. Ladies and gentlemen, before closing, please allow me to briefly also address the transatlantic region. Democracy has been at the core of the transatlantic partnership throughout its history. Our shared values, such as democracy and defending the rule of law, have contributed strongly to building these close ties with the United States and Canada, our closest allies outside of Europe. The inauguration of the new US government in January this year also put the necessity to strengthen the resilience of democratic states on the forefront again. That is why we support President Biden's initiative for a summit for democracy, and why the defense of our open, liberal societies is more important than ever, given the geostrategic challenges we see here. The transatlantic partnership and the process of European integration after the Second World War has taught Germany and Europe to understand the fundamental values that democracy and rule of law have for the development of our societies, our stability and welfare. Resilience of democratic states will also be one of the key areas of Germany's upcoming G7 presidency next year. I therefore look forward to the outcome of your discussions in Bucharest, which also hosts the Bucharest Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center. It aims at anticipating crises and risks, developing analytical tools, and strengthening regional cooperation in the fields of resilience, especially in the EU's neighborhood. I look forward to its research, recommendations, and its contribution to our further discussion in this field. I would like to conclude by wishing you all a successful and interesting forum. Thank you very much.
Excellent introductory remarks there from both of our speakers. We just heard from Miguel Berger. If you are joining us just now online, Miguel Berger is a state secretary with the German Foreign Office, and as far as I can tell, he's retained his position in the recent change of government here in Berlin. He was focusing on disinformation. He touched on a number of themes that we will be picking up over the next half hour or so. He talked about the Summit for Democracy, and we're going to get straight into that too, because we have with us for the next, well, I guess a little more than half an hour, about half an hour, two excellent speakers who can go into the details on this and fill us in from their perspectives, from their experience on democracy, the state of democracy and resilience within the transatlantic space and within Europe and Central and Eastern Europe in particular. Allow me to introduce our two panelists today. We have with us Yves Mathieu. He is the founder director of Missions Publiques. That is an agency that specializes in citizen participation around the world. We just heard Miguel Berga, and also the Mara Šefčovič referring to the importance of getting the voices of the people in the democratic process. So very warm welcome to you, Yves Mathieu. Great to meet you here virtually. Also with us in Bucharest is Clara Volentiru. She is joining virtually this morning, although she's dipping in and out of the venue. This being a pandemic situation, it is perhaps safer in this context for her to join us from her home office, it would seem. She is director of the Aspen New Economy and Society program, and she has been focusing recently very much on democratic resilience, so I know you have a lot to add to this. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Clara is jumping in at the last minute, as it were, because we lost a couple of our planned speakers. A couple of speakers were unable to join us who were originally on the program, so we've adapted the program, and we want to say a very special thank you to Clara Volentiru for joining us this morning. So let's begin by talking about the current state of democracy. We'll then move on to challenges to democracy and measures needed to preserve and strengthen it, i.e. resilience. So as we already heard, the virtual summit for democracy is something that people are talking about very much right now. Joe Biden in the United States, the US president, just kicked that off yesterday. And in kicking that off, he made some very interesting remarks, I found. One was he noted that renewing our democracy and strengthening our democratic institutions requires constant effort. We heard a speaker earlier this morning say that democracy does not happen by accident. Indeed, it does not. It requires a great deal of effort. So my first question to both of you is, how do you see the health of democracy right now in the transatlantic space? Just a very general assessment. Where are things now relative to where they were, and how do you see them evolving? Let's start with you, Clara Volentiru.
Sure. Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. So it is my thanks to all of you. And I must admit, although this is a virtual panel and it was easier for us to log in like this, I have to salute everybody who's in the room in Bucharest for the Bucharest Forum. I was there yesterday, and it's a wonderful, wonderful atmosphere. And the technical complexity that my colleagues at Aspen are managing, it's just astonishing. So many thanks to all of you who are watching us online or in the Parliament Palace at this time. In terms of your question, Terry, I think there's a great deal of anxiety across the transatlantic world with regards to our democratic resilience, as we now all call it. Before we were talking about quality of democracy, now we're talking about democratic resilience. And I think this jargon shift signifies a more astute attention to the crisis component. So before we were in management mode with regards to our democracies, while now we are really struggling to understand the risk factors involved. And I think we need to come to terms with the fact that democracy is not something that can be split from the quality of our governing process, the quality of our institutions. So I think we need to really, really be very much aware of the fact that quality of democracy is linked to quality of government. And in this sense, I don't really feel there's a substantial backsliding in the process, in the democratic process. While Yves might have a different opinion on the varieties of participation and how certain countries are falling back on that respect, but my personal worry, is that in both America and Europe, institutions have failed to deliver. So there's a question of the legitimacy of output in our democracies. And I think that we really need to pay more attention to the output of our democratic process, not just the input and the process itself.
Yves Mathieu. Where are you, by the way, Yves? I know you move around a lot.
Hello. Thank you for hosting me, Terry. Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to be with you today. And I'm in Florence, Italy. I'm in Florence, where we have today, tomorrow and Sunday, the third session of one of the citizens panel that is being implemented inside the Conference on the Future of Europe. So I'm here in the European University Institute of Florence with 200 citizens that have been randomly selected in the 27 European countries. They speak 24 different languages, and they meet, they talk about democracy, the rule of law, and security during this weekend. So it's interesting that you have invited me to join this panel to talk about resilience and democracy, and this is what is happening here. And so it's really, it's fantastic to have this opportunity to share this live with you, because this is, to answer your question, I would say that democracy today is being challenged. It's being challenged by citizens, it's being challenged by reality as well. And I would say that, in fact, democracy will be more resilient if it proves that it can create a more resilient society. And that's really the challenge for democracy today. And we know that for some aspect, like the environmental crisis, democracy is not providing the right answers so far. And so that's one of the challenges now. And we see the youth in the street, we see a lot of anger among citizens because the answers provided by the institutions are not at the right scale, and they are not, the solutions are not implemented at the right pace. And so that's really an issue for the moment. And so that's my answer to your question. It's being challenged. And that's a very good news, because it shows that democracy is alive, the institutions are alive, and the fact that we have today here in Florence 200 citizens to talk about democracy, and it's a proof, a demonstration of new things emerging today in the democratic landscape that can give a vision of what could be the resilient democracy in 20 years from now, with more participation, as it was said by Commissioner Šefčovič.
Thank you very much for those opening statements. We have already opened up considerable room in our discussion. I want to focus a little more on the institutions that are involved here and some of the players that are involved here when we talk about the state of democracy. I found it extremely interesting what Maros Šefčovič said, the EU commissioner, starting off mentioning that about 2/3 of the world do not live in democracies, and those that do live in democracies, 1/3 of those are living in democracies that are declining. So, Clava, when you say that the focus now is on crisis, whereas it used to be on quality of democracy, and Yves, when you say it is indeed under challenge, that we are seeing democracy being challenged, you're putting a good light on that by saying this is a good thing because it's showing how alive it very much is. We still need to think about what that really means in concrete terms. So again, referring back to Joe Biden opening the Summit for Democracy, and this was attended by countries from around the world, representatives of about 100 representatives from different countries around the world. He says there is a sustained and alarming challenges to democracy, and that democracy needs champions. So I would ask the two of you, what champions do you see? It doesn't have to be a country, but it can be an institution, a body, a non-governmental organization for that matter. When we look for champions of democracy, where do we see them, particularly in the transatlantic space and the European space? Would you like to begin? Well, whoever would like to tackle that first. Yeah,
I would. So I do have an answer to your question, and I think it's a wonderful question. I think we need to be looking at any actor, political or civic actor, that is actively engaged in promoting internationalization and international engagement, because at least in the transatlantic sphere, but I would hazard to say everywhere, because I think the quality of democracy is very much linked to the multilateral framework. At least again in the transatlantic space. And closing off our societies is never the answer in a democratic society. So, and it's a wonderful process. And here I'm optimistic, just like Yves was earlier, because I see a lot of effort to engage at an international level, even at local level. So we have this sophistication of engagement and public action increasingly more, even at subnational level. And that shows in the climate agenda, that shows in civic engagement, and I think that contributes substantially to the quality of democracy and national commitments to the democratic process. So if we are to be talking about democratic values in the transatlantic world, we should also be talking about our shared space of values, which is linked to internationalization and international engagement.
Well, internationalization, globalization has been put into question to some degree through the pandemic. But just, I don't want to leave it there. Kyle, I'd like to come back and ask you if you see any examples, specific institutions, specific countries, specific organizations that people could look to and say, oh, that's a champion. I mean, take the United States, for example. The United States was seen as a beacon of democracy. We have a U.S. president who's convening the summit for democracy. Is the U.S. still that beacon of democracy that it once was?
Its action over the past year are showing it wants to be. And I think the Summit for Democracies is a political statement, a diplomatic statement that supports very much the democratic process across Europe and democratic champions, as you rightly said. And I think we have many countries in Europe, many member states that are very much committed to the quality of democracy and rule of law. And despite the fact that Romania was part of these coordination mechanisms within the European Union with regards to rule of law, there has been fantastic progress in our country. Luckily, and that contributed to the quality of democracy and the public engagement, because they felt this is something they need to be fighting for, and we have examples towards that. But if you provoke me, I think in the broader region, Central and Eastern European region, we should be looking at initiatives like the Pact for Free Cities, where local action, cities, capital cities, mayors have been very much fighting for democratic values, and again, broader issues such as the climate agenda, despite backtracking at the national level. So I would definitely call this type of positive resistance a sort of champions of democracy, because you need to keep the lights up even when the storm hits. And we're in Bucharest at 10 a.m. in the morning, and it's really clouded, as you can see. So we want to be looking at champions of democracy as persons who can bring up the light, persons and institutions who can bring up the light when the clouds hit with regards to backsliding at national level.
Yves, champions of democracy. You work all around the world, but looking in this transatlantic space, where do you see them?
They are
Maybe
everywhere.
You're one of them.
They are everywhere, and today there are thousands of initiatives in this transatlantic space for new forms of dialogues between citizens and decision makers, and those people are the champions. Because the poison in democracy is the illusion of simplicity, and also the illusion that disagreement can be solved by vote. It's not the way disagreement can be solved. If we want to increase the resilience of democracy, we need to create new spaces to treat the disagreement in the society. And that's not the vote that solved that. And you see the results of most elections now, it's 51 against 49. So that means that the vote generates a lot of frustration as well. So we need to learn to disagree. And we need to learn to put the disagreement on the front stage of our society and engage people to treat the disagreement, not only citizens, but also decision makers.
I think that's a super important point, and I definitely want to get to that. We have about 15 minutes left, but just again, forgive me for being insistent. It's my nature as a journalist. Can you identify champions? Can you sort of an institution, a country, an organization that you would point to and say, this is making a great contribution to democracy and democracy?
So I'm going to continue on the Conference on the Future of Europe. So I think that the Council of the European Union, the Parliament and the Commission have made a step towards being champion for democracy by creating this Conference on the Future of Europe. Can you imagine that the three institutions have agreed to create a space to dialogue on the future of Europe with citizens who are randomly selected? I mean, it's a huge risk that is being taken. And for me, the champion for democracy in the future are the decision makers that will take the risk and that will quit their space of safety where they feel safe. It's very important to increase resilience to dare to risk new conversations, to risk to talk with people that usually we do not talk with. And so for me, this Conference on the Future of Europe is creating a champion. It will not be perfect, but it's a move, and it's a very interesting move. Not only because there is a space for dialogue, there are randomly selected citizens from 27 countries, but because there is what we call the plenary of the conference. It's a group of 429 decision makers and citizens that meet to discuss about what should be decided in Europe. And that's a new space for decision. And this is just fantastic what is happening there.
Thank you. So I will take that as having identified the European Union with its three institutions and this particular initiative as being a champion in that regard. Just for our audience, the Conference on the Future of Europe, I presume that most people watching this and joining us in Bucharest are aware of what that process is, but it is a collaborative process within Europe where input is being gathered from all citizens that will hopefully result in recommendations that could be turned into treaty changes for the European Union and could have a significant impact on the future development of the European Union. By the way, that gets a very strong mention in the coalition agreement in Germany for the new governments. The new government in Germany will be very much focusing on that as well. Good. So we've looked at some of the at some champions. We've looked at the state of democracy a bit within the transatlantic space. I want to get views from both of you on challenges to that democracy, to democratic resilience. We heard from both of our speakers earlier this morning references who delivered prepared remarks that disinformation is posing a massive problem for democracy coming from different sources. What do you two see as the main threats to democracy right now that makes us need to focus on resilience so strongly? Clara.
So, I mean, I have to align my response to you to the current foresight report because I feel that's a very strong initiative on the part of the European Union. And yes, I think democracy is very much supported by the European Union as much as the local level initiatives that I just mentioned. And I think part of those mega trends and issues need careful consideration. So my own take is that there are two broad challenges. One is trust, and it was mentioned in the Commissioner's intervention. And I think this information affects trust. I think the failures on the governance process have affected trust. I think inequalities and social polarization have also had a very strong catalyst effect on citizens' trust in the democratic process. So I think this issue of trust is an overarching challenge and an overarching objective of our efforts to strengthen democratic resilience. I remember standing exactly where Eve is standing right now in a workshop on trust in institutions very many years ago when I was a scholar at the EUI. And I know there are a great many people who are researching and analyzing the way to boost and enhance people's trust in their institutions. But at the end of the day, we really need to make sure our institutions deliver. So I think this is one challenge. The second challenge, I would say, is having...
Continue, if I can interrupt. Sorry
Sure,
to
please.
interrupt. I'm just wondering, so erosion of trust, right? Lack of trust. But how is that being threatened? By whom or what? That's
It's inward.
a symptom.
It's an excellent point you're making, and I recently wrote a material on the current summit of democracy, and I think it's both inward and outward. So inward, it's the failures of national governments to deliver, and so eroding the democratic process by not delivering. And outward, it's disinformation, disengagement, dissolution of the multilateral ties and engagements, the safety net that provided democratic quality for so long in Europe and America. So I think we need to focus on both inward and outward threats that erode citizens' trust in their institutions. Very, very good point you made. And I completely agree. We need to bear in mind that it's both ways, inward and external, right? But
very interesting. When you talk about the countries themselves, failing to deliver, being one of the the threats to democracy, one of the stressors, that I find that very interesting. Clara, I'm sorry, I know you have more to add to this, but we only have, if I understand it, till quarter after. So I need to move.
One short phrase. The second challenge is having actionable information. So we really, really need to have evidence-based policies to strengthen our democracies. And I think this is a point we can discuss in another panel, but it is necessary to acknowledge that we need better input, better intelligence, better information.
Absolutely. Eve, you're there in Fiesole, overlooking Florence at the European University Institute. I think we're all envious of you sitting up there right now, but you're right in the heart of a democratic process, and you hear the views of citizens on this topic a lot. What do you see as the main threats to democracy, to democratic resilience in this space right now?
So the main threat is closed circles. And that's really the main problem is what I see here is the people who have been randomly selected and who said yes to come. I mean, it's a commitment. They took a risk as well. What they say, if this is politics, I love politics. In fact, people need to reconnect with the complexity of decision-making in the public sphere. And I fully agree with you, Clara. Trust is a key. And to generate trust, it's, of course, to deliver the right answers at the right pace, at the right scale, but also to provide the policy making in a new way. There is a need from the people for a new generation, not in terms of age, but in terms of how to do it. New generation of policy makers and decision makers and leaders with a new relationship with the people. So the main threat, in fact, would be to consider that the institutions that have been created about 300 years are good for the society of the 21st century. They need to change in their way to act in the society, because the people have changed in the last 3 centuries. And the people today, they are informed, they share a lot of things with on the social networks in their life with other people. they want to act in different manners. And so they are expecting an augmented democracy. And the vote is not only it's not the solution. As I said, there is a need for new spaces. And what I hear from people here, we have people who come from the 27 countries and they talk on complex issues like migrations and so on, but they are never in a position of white and black. I mean, it's always very subtle, and they get into the complexity. But for that, you need to take time. And the illusion that problems can be solved with simple solutions is very dangerous to promote, because it's not like that. And it's not by taking 5 minutes to answer to a poll that you can contribute to the public space. You need to take time. And so this is really the ingredient for the augmented democracy. It's addressing the disagreement in spaces where people take time, a new generation of leaders that don't come in front of the constituencies by saying, I have the solutions. It's by saying, we need to find the solutions together, and helping the people to rediscover the pleasure to be in the public space and the pleasure to enter into the complexity. I mean, politics can be a pleasure, but it needs to be shared. And it's not only a question of mind, it's a question of heart, it's a question of feelings, and everything needs to be recognized. And we have a fantastic road ahead of us. It's to reinvent the way politics can be done in a democracy. And this is how it will be more resilient.
Okay, we're already getting into, again, solutions, which is perfect because we're going to have to wrap up in about 4 minutes, I'm told. So Yves, you were saying that closed decision-making processes are a big problem for democracy, and that having augmented democracy, as it were, decision-making processes is something that could contribute to resilience. Clara, we only have a few minutes. What do you see as remedies? If we've described the problem, we've talked about different threats to democracy, and how do you see us proceeding in a way that is going to be constructive to build resilience for democracy in the transatlantic space?
You're very kind. You're very kind with this question, because you offer me the chance to pick up where I left earlier. I'm an academic, and I have to say that solutions also come from research and evidence. And that's why I think one of the major elements that we need to be focused on is developing new metrics. You have the European Commission's dashboard for capabilities and vulnerabilities that covers democracy and socioeconomic and digital and energy aspects. But we at Aspen and German Marshall Fund are implementing new metrics to develop a measurement of societal resilience at local level, because we are only as strong as our weakest link. And if we don't really understand where the vulnerabilities are in our local communities, we can't really develop a national resilience framework. It will be disengaged from the citizens that we're trying to protect.
Very good. Yves, would you like to expand on your comments about how we can strengthen democratic resilience?
My invitation is to jump into the water and experience. We need more and more experience for this new way to activate democracy and to find new spaces of dialogue to address the blockage in our societies and to address the disagreement in the society. And that's the only way to increase the resilience of our democratic regimes, is to find these new spaces. And we can talk about that for years, but it's better to experiment. Just dare to do it, and you'll see it never fails. It never fails, and it generates a lot of satisfaction. So do it.
Just do it. I'm thrilled to hear the optimism coming from both of you about this process, and I think for everyone who's watching this and who's joining us or joining the forum in person in Bucharest today has come away from this discussion with some food for thought from both of you and from the speakers who delivered prepared remarks at the beginning. we need optimism at this point. We do have a sense of being in a crisis mode, and I'm very glad to have spoken with the two of you today. It's been a great privilege for me to be joining the Bucharest Forum again, to be speaking with both of you. Thanks again, Clara, for jumping in at the last minute, and thank you also, Eve, for being so flexible with the preparation for this. I want to thank our hosts at the Aspen Institute in Bucharest and also at the German Marshall Fund for making this possible. And thanks to everyone for following this. All the best for the rest of the forum.
Thank you very much.
Honorable audience, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to contribute to this year's forum and to support the reflection on consolidating resilience in the Eastern neighborhood. Over the last decade, a particular paradigm of security has emerged. We are faced with a multiplication of risks and threats, including hybrid ones of a diverse and unprecedented nature. Threats are becoming more complex and more difficult to detect and address. Their transnational character is also pointing to the fact that no one is immune. Thus, multilateral cooperation in addressing common challenges, the importance of a rules-based international order, and the need to build up our strategic resilience are now crucial in ensuring that our societies can cope with the challenges we face. Resilience is about ensuring much-needed continuity, successfully managing pressure, or responding to shocks. It implies a whole-of-government approach. It means building and strengthening the resilience of our societies, economies, democratic institutions, of our partnerships, and of our multilateral systems. While working on enhancing our own resilience, we should not lose sight of the fact that our security, understood in a wider sense, regarding not only geopolitical tensions and military threats, but also the economic, social, and environmental dimensions, is intrinsically linked with that of our partners, including from our eastern neighborhood. It is in our own interest to help more vulnerable societies become more resilient in coping with security threats, but also with the consequences of all types of emergencies or crises. That is why Romania strongly supports cooperation between the EU and NATO to enhance resilience to hybrid threats, ranging from disinformation to cyber attacks, as it covers both the area of their membership and that of their neighbors. This approach should also be rightfully reflected in the new strategic concept of the alliance. NATO's partnership policy is a long-standing one, the alliance having strong ties and providing key assistance to its partners from the eastern and the southern neighborhoods and from the Western Balkans. In this regard, a defense capacity building initiative and dedicated partnership instruments such as trust funds should be further developed, as they are useful instruments and mechanisms in providing tailored and focused support. As part of Romania's commitment to support the consolidation of the region's resilience, we have set up this year the Euro-Atlantic Center for Resilience, with the aim of promoting a strategic approach to resilience and of providing a platform for meaningful engagement with experts and civil society representatives. Once fully operational at national level, the center will be open to all allies and partners. Prioritizing resilience through policy measures and actions features already prominently among the recommendations put forward by the European citizens in the context of the Conference on the Future of Europe. From Romanian citizens, we heard strong calls for a more resilient union, for building more resilience through education, and capabilities to respond to cyber challenges in the context of accelerated digital transformations. And these are only a few examples. I am confident that there are similar calls for more resilience from other European citizens. Also on the EU side, the Eastern Partnership, through its bilateral and multilateral dimensions, is the most effective tool to support resilience and sustainable development in the Eastern neighborhood. The partnership is also at a key stage. We need to make sure that the strategy and the objectives for the post-2020 era, which we will agree upon at the long overdue Eastern Partnership Summit in just a few days' time, will be implemented. There are three dimensions for projecting sustainable EU influence in support of a stable and democratic neighborhood. First, consolidating the political dialogue. Second, advancing stability and security projects in the region. And third, carrying out efforts aimed at building or enhancing our partners' resilience. Of all, the most effective answer to the overlapping challenges facing the Eastern neighborhood today is, in my opinion, resilience. I believe that our approach to supporting our partners should take into account not only the multifaceted nature of this concept, but also the shared and specific challenges that our partners are confronted with. There is no one-size-fits-all, as both challenges and their sources may vary. Belarus suffers from chronic democratic deficit. In the Southern Caucasus, cooperation should be the key word, not only in support of development and resilience, but also with a view to finding long-standing solutions. Ukraine is facing reform challenges, including the active conflict in the east. The Republic of Moldova has now a unique opportunity to accelerate its modernization, its European path, as well as the consolidation of its democratic system, but continues to face hybrid challenges, such as the recent energy crisis. The EU cannot afford to step back from its strategic commitment towards the Eastern partners. On the contrary, the EU should do more and not less to engage with these partners and support the democratic transformation of the region and their European integration aspirations and efforts. I therefore see 4 strategic priorities for the Eastern Partnership in view of the summit that will take place on December 15 and beyond. These findings also resulted during the diplomatic tour to the South Caucasus countries, which I undertook in June this year together with my counterparts from Austria and Lithuania, as mandated by the High Representative Borrell. First, we should focus on strengthening and making the Eastern Partnership more ambitious. This is even more relevant in the current context, as a speedy recovery from the COVID pandemic and the strengthening of our resilience in facing all challenges will not be possible unless both the EU and its partners implement difficult reforms. The European aspirations of a number of our partners, as well as the efforts they make to back those aspirations with concrete reforms, need to be acknowledged and supported. Second, recommitting to our shared fundamental values as the very foundation that underpins the transformational nature of our partnership. This is key to achieving long-term stability and sustainable development. They show us the true north in a world that is more complex and unpredictable than ever. Third, we need to foster deeper sectoral cooperation with the most advanced and the most ambitious partners in areas such as transport, energy, people-to-people contacts, green economy, and digital transition, health policies, climate trade and investment facilities. This should be based on merits in the implementation of reforms and without prejudice to the inclusivity of the Eastern Partnership. Only by balancing differentiation and inclusivity we can take the Eastern Partnership forward. We need to keep every partner engaged, but without curbing the motivation of individual partners to expand the cooperation in areas of specific interest. Fourth, last but not least, strengthening the security of the Eastern neighborhood, both in terms of supporting our partners in their struggle against hybrid threats and with regard to the settlement of the protracted conflicts. I strongly believe that we need to work on a security and defense dimension of the Eastern Partnership, as we have committed ourselves to do. The most telling examples in this regard are the provisions of the association agreements and of the EU-Armenia Comprehensive and Enhanced Partnership Agreement, where the objective of developing dialogue and deepening cooperation in the field of security and defense, including CSDP, is stated. Moreover, our partners are asking for strengthened security cooperation. In the spirit of joint ownership, we should be able to address their interests. And because I mentioned protracted conflicts, which is a topic of strategic interest for Romania, I want to emphasize that there is a constant need for re-energized efforts at all levels to resolve these conflicts. NATO and the EU should maintain this issue of protracted conflicts in Eastern Europe on their agendas. In fact, this subject should be on the agenda of every multilateral organization through an integrated approach to conflicts and crises. These conflicts poison the security climate and have long-lasting consequences, affecting the stability of the region and of the Euro-Atlantic area as a whole. They also affect the capacity of the countries with such conflicts to perform the reform processes, thus weakening their capacity to act upon the European values and principles. Last year in October, I put forward a proposition, backed by 10 other EU ministers of foreign affairs, to have a more applied EU discussion on protracted conflicts. These conflicts affect so many countries in the Black Sea region and have been hindering their development and European perspectives for so many years, affecting the development of their societies. This proposal was accepted and discussed at the Gymnich informal meeting of the EU Ministers of Foreign Affairs in Lisbon on the 27th of May. Following this step, as I mentioned before, together with my colleagues from Austria and Lithuania and in coordination with the High Representative Borrell, I have embarked on a diplomatic tour in June to the South Caucasus countries, Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia. We conveyed a clear message of EU commitment to supporting the security, stability and prosperity of all three Southern Caucasus countries, stressing that the EU has the means and the will to be much more present in the region and to get involved in the settlement of these conflicts. At the subsequent Foreign Affairs Council, I have presented a comprehensive set of conclusions and proposals which need to be followed on at EU level. Ladies and gentlemen, we should spare no effort to break the cycle of conflicts, instability and competing interests that harm the peoples of the region. And this is why Romania is firmly committing to supporting combined efforts to strengthen the resilience of our Eastern partners. This principled support comes from understanding our common strategic interest of projecting and facilitating a climate of security, democratic stability and socio-economic progress in our immediate neighborhood and at the Black Sea, benefiting the Euro-Atlantic community, the EU and its partners. We have to build leverages in the region and to demonstrate that the EU is a persistent and a relevant global actor. Thank you for your kind attention.
I'm very proud to present the panelists today talking about building resilience in the Eastern neighborhood. And I will quote only a small part of the presentation that we all have. This panel will analyze the challenges to strengthening the resilience of the partners in the East, while seeking to identify those measures that exist or could be built in the context of the Eastern Partnership, as well as with the support of other actors such as NATO. So resilience seems to be the most important subject of this debate and of this forum. I am very proud to have here with physical presence Secretary of State Dan Niculescu, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Minister, thank you for being here. Together with us also Michael Siebert, which is Managing Director of European External Action Services. Michael Siebert, thank you. Jaroslav Kurfürst, Ambassador, Special Envoy for the Eastern Partnership. Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. Thank you for being with us. Sergi Kapanadze is the founder of the Georgia's Reform Associates, former Vice Speaker of the Georgian Parliament. Thank you for being with us. Andrius Kubilius, Chair of the Delegation of Euronest Parliamentary Assembly of the European Parliament. Thank you for being here with us. I'm sure it will be a very interesting panel. I'll give the floor to Secretary of State Dan Niculescu, and then all of you will have the presentation and we'll have some short debates and the conclusion. Secretary of State, thank you again for being here. We are listening to you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much for this invitation. A very timely discussion. I think it's one of the first times when I participate in hearing that when we talk about NATO, you mentioned in the beginning other actors as NATO. Usually I'm used to NATO as a prime actor, but this is a good thing because it means that we have also a lot of other things to, other modalities and means to increase and contribute to the resilience in the Eastern neighborhood. I won't be very long, but I would like to focus on a few aspects. It is not a secret that we are looking to our region today and see that the security situation is very difficult and complex. And I think this is also having a very enormous impact on the resilience and on the well-being of our Eastern partners. So I would say first, if we want to build resilience, we would have to have a better security environment. And in this context, I think both NATO and EU have a role to play. I think NATO is developing this deterrence and defense policy, which is going great, but I think given the situation that we are seeing in the last days, I think NATO should continue this policy of deterrence and defense and should to think of more, let's say, more ideas how to supplement its presence, but also its action on the eastern flank in order to deter the potential threats. Another thing that I believe is important to mention here when we speak about the resilience in the Eastern partners is we need, as EU and NATO together, to look more closely to our partners. It seems from time to time that those partners sometimes are neglected. Maybe I am making a big statement today, but this is from time to time the feeling that I've got when we discuss policy towards our partners. I think both NATO and EU have to make a point that if they want to make it as global actors, they have to make sure they have paying attention and they are contributing in their close vicinity. And therefore, in this respect, we're going to have in a few days the Eastern Partnership Summit, which we have a lot of, let's say, expectations. And I think it is important that we keep this Eastern Partnership going on and that we have to be more, let's say, optimistic and more involved. And here, I believe we also, another tier that I'm looking for when we discuss about the resilience is reforms. You know, I think there is the duty of our partners also to step up and continue the reforms, the democratic reforms they engage in. And I think this is also a thing where we should support them. And here, Romania has been quite active in the recent days and months, not talking only about our friends in Georgia and Ukraine, but also Republic of Moldova, which recently has become, in our view, again, a champion of the Eastern Partnership, given the democratic changes that we have witnessed there. And all in all, I think we have also another, let's say, tier when we are working at is the Euro-Atlantic Center for Resilience, which is still in operational mood. I mean, we are going to work hard probably to make it full operational next year, and we have to, you know, make sure that it becomes also an international, let's say, body, not only a national body. And this is another, let's say, contribution that Romania is bringing to the region and to increasing resilience. We expect this center to have also to host also relevant international specialist experts to talk about how we can improve resilience in NATO and EU. So therefore, I tried very briefly to say that security matters and that we need to invest as NATO and EU in security in order to build resilience. I think another tier would be to work with our partners in order for them to continue their democratic reforms. This is for sure another thing that we can strive at building resilience. And third, also from the national point of view, we can work with this Euro-Atlantic Center for Resilience to make it, you know, really relevant in the region and to attract support, so it can become a beacon of, let's say, good practices in terms of resilience. I'm sure there are others, but I'm rather looking forward to the debate rather than focusing on the each and every tier. Thank you very much.
Thank you, State Secretary Nicolaescu. I wrote 4 of your ideas, and we will have a debate after the presentations. Mihail Zibert, as Managing Director of the European External Action Service, how would you assess the EU and NATO contribution to the resilience concept, especially here on the eastern side of Europe?
Thank you very much. Speaking for the European Union, very happy to be with you today in this panel. You wouldn't be surprised that I would focus more on the EU than on NATO, but we can discuss later. I would like to tell you what we propose as being the new, the future EAP agenda very briefly, how we understand resilience, and how we intend to reflect that in our agenda. The Eastern Partnership is of very high importance to us. I would friendly like to disagree with any feeling of being neglected in the Eastern Partners countries. We're having a very important summit next week, and it will show, give a political signal, a very important signal that we do care very much for our partners, and their resilience is also our resilience in the European Union. We are convinced of that. The situation around is very difficult. We can discuss this in detail, the situation in Belarus, including the migration aspect, the forced migration aspect, the energy crisis recently in Moldova, the situation in Ukraine, exacerbated recently by the looming threats to Ukraine from Moscow, and everything topped, of course, by the COVID pandemics. So what we propose in terms of the upcoming new Eastern Partnership programs is resilience, recovery, and reform. These are the 3 underlying elements, and the areas of resilience we are talking about today are 5. It's resilience of the economy, it's resilience of the rule of law and governance, it's resilience in environment and climate, it's resilience in the digital sector, and last but not least, resilience in fair and inclusive societies, contributing a lot to that. We have 2 pillars. One is the governance pillar, and the other one is the investment pillar. Both are interdependent and equally important. So what do we understand by resilience? It is investing in the resilience of states and societies. And the capacity to reform that State Secretary mentioned is, of course, of utmost importance to that. Resilience is a broader concept, and a resilient state is a secure state. So to create democratic institutions that the citizens trust in is at the center of our concept of resilience. So how do we reflect this finally in our new program for the Eastern Partnership? We promote the fundamental values as we have done before. This includes good governance, the rule of law, fighting corruption, setting up and supporting an independent judiciary. Also, we will focus on investments, the second pillar. We have prepared a 2.3 billion euro program, which can be leveraged up to 17 billion euro. And I give you a few concrete examples, not to finish it too abstractly. Strengthening, for instance, core transport links and energy resilience, green port in Baku, green buses in Yerevan, and a submarine cable under the Black Sea. Another point, support to SMEs, which are the backbone of the economies. We will support thousands of SMEs. Then a focus on infrastructure and digital services and skills, including for public administration. As an example, in Ukraine, with the full modernization of the IT infrastructure, and also another example, broadband access in rural areas of Georgia. Another point is the adaptation of the whole region to the challenges of climate change. And lastly, human capital. We will focus on human capital, for instance, in Moldova, with modernization of school infrastructure and implementation of the national education strategy. A novel part of the cooperation will be the health coordination and cooperation on health matters to support partners' countries' health systems, providing medical equipment, rollout of vaccines, and recognition of the digital COVID certificates that is already working for Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and Armenia, and we're talking with Azerbaijan to make it happen as well. And then finally, security is an important matter, and I'm sure we will discuss this more. The European Union, of course, is more on the soft side of security. We will deal with hybrid and cyber matters, training opportunities, capacity building. Partner countries are already and will participate more in CSDP missions, and also we have just decided about the first part of giving funds from the European Peace Facility, in that case to Ukraine and Georgia. And we will tackle with disinformation and continue to promote the peaceful settlement of conflicts. This was like a very short overview, and happy to discuss it more in detail later. Thank you.
Zibert, we are listening now the presentation of Andrius Kubilius, and I'm sure we will find new and interesting things. Andrius Kubilius, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for organizing this very important conference before Eastern Partnership Summit. And very briefly, I will try to say a few words, being member of European Parliament now. Before that, 2 times Prime Minister of Lithuania. How to assist, Eastern Partnership countries with, real progress for them. So usually when we are talking from European Parliament, from EU institutions, we are concentrating our talks about, what what our Eastern partners should do, what they are, what kind of mistakes they are making. We are, sending some critical messages. That is, everything is really important, good, and so on and so on. But I think that we are forgetting that there are two sides of the same partnership. One is Eastern Partnership countries, another one is EU. And I think that we need to be also self-critical about what EU is, doing, and what kind of, sometimes mistakes or some steps should be done, from EU side in order really to assist Eastern Partnership countries really with that major topic of today, with the goal of today, resilience. Of course, resilience is quite a broad, idea, not very clear what you can put into resilience, whatever you want. But I would say that there are two branches of resilience. One is, the challenges to democracies of Eastern Partnership countries, which we can call, internal challenges, how to assist those countries really to build, a stable, mature democracy, stable rule of law, really how to make those countries, moving ahead towards economical success and so on, which is the basis for some kind of resilience. And another challenge is, of course, external challenges. And that is where we can talk about security, both from military point of view, but also from other points of view. For example, I would really would like to see that EU is understanding what kind of challenges, external challenges, to our Eastern Partnership countries is bringing their weakness in energy supplies, and that EU should bring some kind of real ideas, real assistance, how assist those countries with getting rid of Gazprom monopoly, with investment into some infrastructure, not only in those countries, but for example in Romania, in Slovakia, in Poland, to have reverse capacities, real reverse capacities, to bring gas flows, from west to east, to Ukraine, to Moldova. I am not, at least I know what could be done. But I will spend more time on this, internal resilience. What EU can do in order to assist those countries with internal resilience. And from my point of view, really, EU can assist those countries, first of all, using its soft power. We sometimes are forgetting how powerful is that instrument. Of course, EU is doing a lot, bringing money, bringing advice how to make reforms. But the biggest assistance which EU can bring to those countries is really to use its soft power in a most effective way, and soft power of integration, of building and keeping aspiration of those countries to move forward, bringing some background for a stable motivation for reforms. I think this is where EU is most important, with using that instrument. And that is what we faced, back in Central Europe, in Baltic countries in 1990s. This promise for us of integration was the most powerful instrument which assisted us to build a resilient countries. If not that, I don't know where we would end, with all our problems, to stabilize our democracies, to stabilize our rule of law systems, and so on and so on. So I would say that really, and we with Mr. Siebert, we are discussing that, from time to time, and I hope that, things can move forward, slowly, but can move. I think that there is really a lack of that, geopolitical promise from EU side, prudent promise to Eastern Partnership countries, which would keep their aspiration, keep their motivation for reforms, but we need to understand also why this, lack of geopolitical promise is today's reality. And only when we shall understand what are the problems inside of EU, why EU is not able to bring some kind of this, what I call geopolitical promise or soft power instrument, full scale, soft power instrument to what our Eastern Partnership countries, perhaps we shall understand what can be done in order really not to stay with that situation, which I consider as becoming more and more dangerous, because instead of really assisting those countries with resilience, bringing some possibilities for them to build long-term resilience, internal resilience, without our ability to bring some kind of this promise, we are creating dissatisfaction. We are creating basis for political polarization in different countries, like we now see in Georgia and things like that. So what we started to discuss in Euronest, and recently we passed a special resolution or message in Euronest Bureau, is really to understand. We called to understand that full membership for time being for Eastern Partnership countries is perhaps difficult to speak about that, because different EU member states don't want to discuss future enlargement without internal reforms of EU institutions, because decision making inside of EU is becoming really very problematic. And that is why it would be good and geopolitically wise to propose to Eastern Partnership countries as some kind of this soft power instrument from EU side, real integration into single market, for freedom. So we can call into European Economic Area like an intermediate, step forward, not abandoning the dream, to have full membership at some time, but for this period of time, for this decade, we have to concentrate all our efforts, all our geopolitical efforts on integration into single market, or on implementation of Romano Prodi formula from 2002, everything but institutions. That would bring the countries really, all the benefits, economical benefits of the full membership. That could be, an inspirational and motivational, clear goal, and that's what really help those countries to strengthen their internal resilience, with clear agenda of reforms. And
Thank you, Andrius Kubilius. Now we give the floor to Ambassador Jaroslav Kurfürst. Please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. Good morning to everyone. We have a great timing, really on the doorstep of the summit. A great topic, resilience, which is now appearing everywhere, and great venue, Bucharest Forum in the country, which really founded the Center of Excellence for Resilience. This resilience is becoming an important word, and some speakers before me said that we can put everything into it. So it would be maybe good to decipher a little bit what does it mean. And I think my first thesis will be that this is a sort of permanent effort. This is no destination. There is no end state for becoming resilient. And this is also some commodity which cannot be imported or exported. This is basically the homework of each country. But there can be a lot which can be done for helping to build the resilience. And I think this is a duty of the European Union the interest, strategic interest of the European Union to come to the neighborhood, especially to the countries which have the European aspirations, and build this resilience or help them to build the resilience. Some people during the discussions in the past years about the new agenda for the Eastern Partnership are saying that resilience is not enough, that this is something which is not offering the integration, this is something which does not move the geopolitical status of the partners, this is just feeding them with some agenda. I would say that this is not right. I believe that resilience is a provide a great framework and great space for many activities in a very wide range of areas, not only security, but including security. Of course, it doesn't offer the integration, but as you know, there are in the EU countries which would like to offer this light at the end of the tunnel, and the tunnel might be long, but the light should be there. But also there are countries which disagree, and this issue is really not easy. While resilience, it's something which is very much needed, and it has a great potential we cannot just miss. Now, before I will dwell a little bit about what we can do about resilience, I would like to offer one terminological issue. Because we are speaking not about the resilience of the computer network, but about the resilience of the states, so very complex issues. But here I would like to put in front of the brackets as a precondition the word democratic resilience. Of course, we don't want to make them resilient some autocracies. So maybe it would be good in the Eastern Partnership to speak in general about democratic resilience as something which will become part of the vocabulary we use. Now, Czech Republic, you know, in the second half of next year will have a presidency, and we will serve, of course, as a honest broker, but looking at the priorities in the Eastern Partnership, resilience, we would like to offer as one of the key topics. And what we see as the most important is to translate the resilience from the abstract concept and very general term to a concrete agenda where the projects are behind it and where money are behind the projects. Of course, there is the first obstacle is that the concept is really general. So what we can do about this is to structure that concept and prioritize. What are the areas where the needs of the partners needs to be tackled? So first, the structuration of the topic, it was done already. If you look at the Council conclusions on the Eastern Partnership from 11th of May 2020, and you have a look on Article 8, you will find exactly, I think, 9 different important sources of or areas where the resilience should be developed and strengthened, and maybe the idea of doing something with that structure would be a good one, because what is resilience? This is the ability to recover or to cover the vulnerable part, the vulnerabilities. So maybe it would be a good idea to make the audit of vulnerable points of our partners, of course, tailored audit. Each country has a different vulnerabilities. And then to match this audit of vulnerabilities with the action plan, how the EU can help build capacities and really help partners to do the homework I was talking about. So I think that the EU can have a good toolbox on that. We should not avoid the issue of security. Of course, Michael Siebert and other people were talking about these areas. EU is not a provider of hard security primarily, that's NATO, but the EU can do a lot in the softer areas, use the soft power, but also tackle the problems of disinformation and hybrid threats, etc. The EU is the most powerful regulator with a lot of might in this civilian field. So it should use this power in the real policy. So definitely, yes. Yeah, I will maybe stop here and we'll be ready for the discussion.
Thank you, Ambassador Kurfürst. Now we're going to Georgia. The floor goes to Sergi Kapanadze, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be present at this interesting forum and to talk about resilience, particularly in the run-up to the Eastern Partnership Summit. Now, if we look at what resilience actually means, if you look at the dictionary definition, it is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It is the ability to spring back into shape. It is the ability to bounce back from the negative experiences and disturbances. And so if we take that as a definition, if we take those words for face value, and then look at whether we have been resilient here in Georgia, I'll maybe speak a few words about the Georgian experience. I wouldn't really say that we've been that much resilient. In fact, in the last years, we've seen increased authoritarianism here. We have seen the increased problems with the governance. Some call it even state capture, with one individual and the people around him getting hold of all the institutions, leading to extreme polarization in the society and the political disturbances that we've had, at least for the last 2 years. We've had 2 very dubious and questionable elections, widely assessed as rigged and as not representing the will of the people. We have ongoing attacks on the free media. Even as we speak now, most media channels here are either under investigation or their founders are under the legal scrutiny with a serious threat that they might be shut down. And we have political persecutions with the former president in jail, being mistreated, as well as many other political leaders also under investigation. So if you ask me, from my perspective, the resilience of Georgia is not that good. And neither is unfortunately, neither have the attempts from the side of the European Union or the United States have made us more resilient, even though there have been numerous attempts to assist us. And so that is the status quo. It's a very unfortunate status quo, I would say, that we have here. But not to be entirely pessimistic, I still think there are ways that can make us more resilient, particularly in the context of our relations with the European Union, and also in the context of even the upcoming Eastern Partnership Summit. So Mr. Zibert and Mr. Kubilius have talked at length about what needs to be done and what is to be expected from the Eastern Partnership Summit. I would say that all the ideas which will be listed, that we know in the declaration, which are based on the joint staff paper of the European Commission, and then also the Council conclusions, which were also mentioned here by Mr. Kurfürst, those are all very good ideas. Those 10 goals to make us more resilient are very noble goals. The resources which will be added to that, which is being discussed now, whether it's the 2.1 billion or even the potential of more or tripling that amount, that is all very good. And I think that is a right way to approach the problems we have here. However, I would stress one particular point which I would like to see from the side of the European Union in the upcoming days, months, even years. That is more conditionality attached to all of this. In other words, on the one hand, more for more, and that's what the 3 countries, Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, have been aspiring to form the so-called trio, association trio. In other words, the 3 countries who have bigger ambition, who want to join the European Union, who are willing to also talk about the other ideas. For instance, the ones that Mr. Kubilius suggested, some kind of interim, more integration into the European single market, but with that big geopolitical promise, to quote Andreas, which means the eventual membership of the European Union. So that trio format, which consists of the countries who might have democratic problems like Georgia does right now, the countries in which Moldova is now obviously a front runner. We used to be at a certain point, not anymore. Supporting the trio format, I think, would be one thing that would make these countries more resilient on the one hand, and then also more aspiring for the European integration on the other hand. The other point of the conditionality is less for less. All the things I mentioned here internally with Georgia, whether it's the problems related to democracy or problems related to elections, etc., I think European Union needs to step up and have more conditionality attached to this. In other words, if you don't perform, the government should expect that they will be reprimanded at least, but also it would have the influence on the decisions EU makes when it comes to the further financial assistance or further process of integration for that matter. Because otherwise, if that is not happening, what we see is less resilience. What we see is more and more deviation from the European values. We have seen in the recent months more anti-European Union rhetoric, anti-Western rhetoric here, which has not been the case for years. But we see this, and one of the reasons for that is that when the Georgian government makes a pledge to do something, and then they don't do it, even if it concerns the political agreement mediated by Charles Michel, and then nothing follows as a result, they are emboldened to do even worse things. So it's more for more on the one hand and less for less on the other hand. Having a very strong message on that could actually be the best thing we can get from the European Union. And the final point, I also think that just not to be talking only about the EU and what we can get from the EU, also what TRIO can do among themselves. And I'm a strong believer that there can be bigger intra-TRIO integration. We're talking here about what the EU can offer to these countries, about access to the single market, more participation in everything but institutions. But then I think TRIO internally can also do a lot of things, whether it is establishing the 4 freedoms among ourselves, whether it is making sure that we have a single political message, we have a single united strategy, because if we do that, and there's a lot to be done there. Yes, we have good trade relations. We do not have conflicts among ourselves. We are not like as Balkan states used to be among themselves. We're a lot kind of more advanced there, but we still have a lot to go, whether it concerns the free movement of capital or the free movement of services, or whether it concerns being on the same page when it comes to the European Union integration. So my recommendation to these states would be pursue more intra-TRIO integration. European Union has talked with the Balkans through the Berlin process about the importance of internal integration, and I think we don't need to wait for the EU to have the similar message to us. We can also pursue these things ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dear panelists, I want to start the debate. We have 20 minutes for this debate. And I want to propose you a certain aspect. Resilience seems to be the most important criteria for all EU and NATO members. It seems as an objective for the Euro-Atlantic area, whether we are talking about members or partners, EU and NATO. So from this point of view, I want to remind you a certain process that we in Romania and other Eastern European countries get when we joined NATO. It was called Membership Action Plan. We had certain criteria to meet to join NATO. In Romania and other countries, we had 5 cycles of Membership Action Plan. And at the end of this Membership Action Plan, all the countries knew that they are ready to join NATO. I'm asking you, and I'm proposing you this debate, can we settle in the Euro-Atlantic area, EU, NATO, partners, a resilience action plan with definitions, with objectives, and at the end of this resilience action plan, we can all say that we are resilient and we can act together, preparing during the good times for the bad times to come? Secretary of State Nicolescu.
I was trying to avoid this question, but yes, I would like to start by going back to what Mr. Sieber has made, and maybe I would like to refine a bit my word neglect, because maybe it wasn't the best word, and I would like to thank him for his work in the EAS and on the Eastern Front, because I know he's doing a lot. Yes, I just wanted to come back to say that maybe the Eastern partners are not necessarily neglect, but they deserve permanent attention, to be very clear on the wording. Now, coming back to your ideas, the resilience plan, it will be a dream come true, but it's not that easy. Let's be honest with us. I mean, bringing the 2 sides of the Atlantic together, NATO and EU, to talk about resilience plan to be applied to member states and to aspirants and to partners, this is very difficult, Radu. I don't think we can get that very easy. I think we can strive for that. We can have as an objective. I think, for instance, this Euro-Atlantic Center can do that. I mean, can help that. We as member states, but it's not something that we can, it's rather something that we can dream of rather than have a very concrete, let's say, results soon. Because at the word of fragmentation we are seeing now, the security threats that we are seeing now, I don't think this is possible overnight. But what I'm thinking, however, is that could be an objective. And this is the first time that I'm talking about, and I'm hearing about a resilience plan to that nature, and I will take it very seriously into consideration as an idea. And thank you for that.
Thank you. That's gave us a bit of courage for our debate. Mikhail Zibert, could we have a resilience action plan for Euro-Atlantic area for all members and partners know the criteria and the end of the road, and we can all celebrate, I don't know, in our lifetime that we are resilient?
I think it's a very good idea. It's a buzzword that resonates with me. I think this is basically encapsulating what we all have to strive for in these difficult and challenging times. And somehow, I think in various formats, various institutions, various programs, we are already doing part of that. Nobody before you, I guess, has called it a resilience action plan, but I would see what we want to agree upon at the summit next week as part of such a Euro-Atlantic resilience action plan. And we should strive also for complementing the efforts of various institutions like EU and NATO in that respect. Now, as I think mentioned in the beginning, the resilience of partner countries is for us a very important part of the resilience of the European Union and of the like-minded, you can call them Western states as a whole. This is all interlinked, so I really like this concept. Maybe if I'm allowed to, replying to Sergei Kapanadze, the concept of more conditionality, more for more and less for less is very much what we have in mind. Normally we tend to formulate it positively, calling it more for more, but of course it implies less for less as well. And here you mentioned Georgia as a case. I think we always have to find the fine line in this exercise between underpinning this conditionality, as you, I think, rightly said, on the one hand, and kind of not throwing the kid with the bathwater on the other hand. When I hear voices to put sanctions on Georgia because this or that admittedly very important point, for instance, on judicial reform aspects in Georgia is not being fulfilled in the way, for instance, the Venice Commission sees it. I think it would be overdoing to start sanctioning, but there is of course a way to adjust funding and support to the performance, and exactly that is what we want to do. Thank you.
Sergei Kapanadze, you can continue after all these ideas expressed by Michael Zibert. He's mentioning you, and please tell us that if you agree with this idea, we are trying to get a very democratic and open vote in this panel, if you agree with the resilience action plan in the Euro-Atlantic area.
Which end with either the full integration or the membership, or have a clear goal formulated in them. That's jokingly, obviously. But then at the same time, obviously, any process, any action plan, or any direction which has a very clear milestones, which has a very clear understanding of what needs to be done and what is the consequence if that is not being done. In other words, the approach where you go from one milestone to the other milestone, and then if you don't perform, you are, you have to pay the consequences, figuratively speaking, is what I think is important for this particular region. And once again, I can only speak with regard to Georgia, but it's more or less also relevant for the other countries, because we've seen the processes in Moldova, before Maya Sandu came to power. We've seen the processes in Ukraine just a few years ago. So it's more or less the same process everywhere. And in this context, also to what Michael Ziebert has mentioned, obviously, I would only welcome this more for more and less for less being actually used with regard to the Eastern Partnership states on a frequent basis, I would say. And once again, it's not about sanctioning Georgia. I don't want Georgia to be sanctioned, to be perfectly frank with you. However, when it comes to sanctioning certain individuals who are hampering the democratic process, I think that could be an idea. But it's not even about sanctions. It's about responding to the steps which are clearly against European values. For instance, when there is a complete consensus that the judicial appointments should not be done the way they are done, and they are done anyways, and what follows as a result from the European Union is a threat to withhold the microfinancial assistance, and the response to it from the Georgian government is that we don't need microfinancial assistance, and that's where the story ends. That does not make Georgia resilient. What it does is that it actually emboldens the government also not to do the other things, or to do even worse things with media, with the political opponents, because the message they've heard was that the most the EU can do is to withhold the assistance, and all they have to say is they don't need that assistance any longer. You see, so I think that is a vicious circle in which I don't like to see my country in, but unfortunately that's where my country is in right now. And so just to sum up, European Union has a crucial role there, a crucial role of making it very clear that Georgia's reforms, Moldova's reforms, Ukraine's reforms are watched seriously and are followed on if there is a misstep on the reforms or reverting back to the authoritarians. That's the only way how this message, coupled with the very strong pro-European support of the population here, very strong support, that together can be what can lead us forward.
Thank you, Andrius Kupilius. I think we are not discussing about EU resilience and NATO resilience. We are talking about the same criteria, and especially when we behave in to our partners, we have to give the same signal, the same objectives. And do you agree that we together have to create a plan of resilience in order to know clearly what does we have to fulfill, members or partners?
Yeah, good question, but I would answer maybe in a very, clear way. We can try to, find new and new names and titles for, for the process, not really, concentrating on some very clear steps which we need to do, So I see very clearly, we can call it resilience, action plan, but resilience comes with integration and with membership into EU or into NATO, in both, in the Euro-Atlantic community. If we are not, moving with that integration, but just, trying to find a way how to avoid word of integration, and we are looking for new wording, and we try to call it, resilience action plan, it does not work. Resilient comes with membership and gray zone in which those countries are staying, and with some kind of, I would call stagnation of geopolitical, developments in this region. This gray zone is against of resilience of those countries. That is what we need to understand in a very clear way. And so I agree, we can call it, resilience or whatever, but the content should be very, very clear. It's integration plan. Without integration, no Central European or Baltic countries would be able really to create resilience which they created. That's again very sure, very clear. No country after 1990 being alone, was able to move forward with its reforms or with its resilience. So I would say we need to have two membership action plans or two resilient action plans. One is readiness, to join, to integrate with intermediate status or whatever. It's tactics. It's It's really what we can discuss. But one plan should be for readiness of Eastern Partnership countries to join, to integrate. And second plan, it's readiness of NATO and EU member states to integrate those Eastern Partnership countries. I see more problems on the side of us, of our institutions, that we are not ready to integrate them, and that creates all frustration and all dissatisfaction and so on and so on. And sometimes it looks like that we are much better with resilience action plan for Eastern Partnership countries, but with appeasement of Putin plan, and that is our problem in reality. So let's understand what does it mean resilience action plan. It goes only with integration, and let's look into that direction.
Very interesting. So we have the second concept launched in this panel, high readiness resilience forces that can act all over Euro-Atlantic area. Ambassador Kurfürst, will you join us to launch this initiative in this panel with the resilience action plan?
Absolutely. That was why I mentioned it, that is a good idea. On integration, I think what Mr. Kubilius said, this is a homework of those countries in the EU to convince the rest of the EU that this is a good path. And we have to invest into that homework, because without the unity in the EU, nothing like this will happen and will stay a dream. So we have to increase the dialogue and really talk about it within the European Union first. While the resilience, as I said, this is not a destination, this is a process. It will be much more difficult to see a global Euro-Atlantic resilience action plan for a whole area and several institutions. But it will be much easier and more realistic to have a look on the vulnerabilities, because resilience is connected with vulnerabilities. To have a look on vulnerabilities of the Eastern partners and to craft the resilience action plan to tackling these vulnerabilities. I'm very much inspired by the exercise we did in 2016, where there was this migration crisis and disinformation spreading, etc. And we did the audit of the Czech national security. From the audit, there was plenty of vulnerable spots highlighted. And then there was the action plan, which was just trying to cover the vulnerabilities. While what we discuss in the Eastern Partnership, this is not only about the security. Of course, the energy security is there and different aspects like cyber, but also the wider resilience. So this is something it is worth trying to have a debate about among the EU and with partners in the days after the summit.
Thank you, Ambassador Kurfürst. Secretary said.
I just wanted to add something. Romania has been and continues to be a strong supporter of enlargement processes in NATO and EU as well. But on the other hand, we know that this enlargement and integration is not an easy thing. It takes a lot of preparation, it takes a lot of reforms, it also takes a political strategic decision. However, until we get that, and here I would like to sympathize with our colleague, Mr. Kubilius, talking about the integration as being the end objective. But before we do that, I think one of my things when I talked at the beginning about so-called neglection or the permanent attention is to keep the partners alive, connected, and doing the reforms. And I think a resilience action plan could be a missing link here, that I'm going to work on that. Of course, resilience action plan applies also to allies and EU partners at the beginning. Of course. But at the second stage, when we talk about enlargement, I think resilience can also be applied and worked with our partners to make them prepare and keep them prepared all the time until that moment of joy when the decision is taken. Thank you.
If you want to draw the conclusion. Andrews? You have been mentioned by the Secretary of State, Nicholas.
I think that, again, I would call, we can call whatever resilience plan, but resilience should not be separated from long-term strategy of integration. This is not should not be two separate directions or two separate stages. If now we shall concentrate on just on resilience, like survival, strategy, and only after some time we shall start to talk about integration, that would be a mistake. Those countries which we would like to assist them, Eastern Partnership countries, trio countries, they need to have clear vision what is next in general on their agenda, what they can achieve, where they need to concentrate their efforts for next decade. It's very clear, this psychological process of carrot and stick is what is working, and I absolutely agree with Mr. Kapanadze, we need to have clear actions, with more for more and less for less principles, and to show that we are able to implement them. Of course, Moldova now is front runner, so let's show that we are able to give Moldova something more, even to make differentiation among those trio countries. That really we really are very happy with Moldova developments, and we are concentrating our efforts to help them. Maybe that would be also a good message, for political community, for example, in Georgia, to understand very simply, if they will stay in that, political crisis for a long period of time, then, they will become, they will get much less of, support from EU. That is what is working, and so. Again, I agree with whatever we should call. We can call it resilience action plan. But again, I would say that we need to see two sides. One side is Eastern Partnership countries, what they need to do and how to assist them. Another side is ourselves, inside of EU, inside of member states. And I agree absolutely that we need to see those member states who are more skeptical. We should try to be in dialogue with them to try to convince them that this resilience strategy is very important for the whole EU, because I always repeat the formula which was perhaps invented, if I am correct, by Commissioner Hahn when he was responsible for enlargement, and his formula is very simple. If we are not able to export stability into our neighborhood, of Eastern Partnership countries, then we need to be ready that we shall start to import more and more instability from that region. So that is what we need to understand, as very clear, goal not only for Eastern Partnership countries to strengthen their resilience, but also us, So that's my answer. Let's move forward, more with some kind of concrete, strategies on both sides, long-term strategies. We can call them whatever, integration or resilience strategy, but those are the same, directions.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our debate. I want to thank the panelists. From my point of view, it was a very, very good debate. With the qualified majority, we can approve the Resilience Action Plan to be proposed to both EU and NATO leaders. And I hope this will be the first sign of strategic solidarity between EU and NATO. Thank you all, and let's drink a coffee for this success. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to the panel which is about healthcare, which is a kind of first time in this kind of context. This is the good part, this is the good news. Of course, there are some unpleasant news, and at the beginning of this day, I was thinking to propose our guest, our panelist, to try to pronounce this name COVID as not as frequent. Try to talk more about systemic things, but of course, some news this morning made me realize that this is not possible. It's basically yet unrealistic. I am honored to be part and to moderate this panel. My name is Vlad Miksic, and I would like to introduce the other guest. I want to start by introducing Professor Dr. Rafila. He is the current Minister of Health of Romania. He is a medical doctor. He holds for quite a lot of time a leading role in the microbiology department of the University of Medicine and Pharmacy in Bucharest. He also played an important role in founding the laboratory of the Matei Balch Institute. He was an elected member of the executive board of WHO, and in the last year, vice president of the Romanian parliament, and now he holds this leading role. I want also to salute Professor Mario Monti. Sir, we are honored that you are here with us, virtually, but you are here with us. Professor Monti, of course, he doesn't need any kind of introduction. Currently, he is the president of Bocconi University. He was the Prime Minister of Italy, Minister of Finance, and European Commissioner. So again, sir, thank you for being with us today. I also want to welcome Mr. Radu Rășinar. He held many positions in a leadership role, mainly in the pharma industry. He holds also quite an impressive experience at European level, coordinating and leading several units across Europe, Romania, Poland, Central Eastern Europe, and not only. We are also glad that you are here with us. And also, I want to welcome Mr. Mihnea Rădulescu. I need to read your title, Business Director at Vodafone Romania, but Mr. Rădulescu, he played an important role in C-levels positions during the last years. He was the CEO of UPC Romania and has lots of experience in managerial positions. So, after this introduction, let's start talking about what is a buzzword today. In healthcare, in the last decade, we had several buzzwords. We had the patient-centric buzzword. We had the value-based healthcare buzzword. Right now, we have a buzzword which is quite unspecific for us, people working in the healthcare area. We have this buzzword which is used also in many other areas. It was also frequently mentioned in previous panels during Bucharest Forum. And this buzzword is resilience. So, resilience of healthcare systems. What resilience means? Resilience means to adapt quickly and be flexible, so when a shock will hit you, the system will not collapse. and will function at a decent level. So adaptability and flexibility are two key attributes of any resilient system. Healthcare systems are well known across many industries by holding lots of inertia. They are like huge boats. It's very difficult to turn them around. So when we are talking about resilience, the resilience of a healthcare system, we tend, and me personally, I'm afraid that we are talking about a too theoretical concept which is too ambitious. If we want to bring this concept, and I am asking you, let's try to bring this concept at an operational level. Let's try to bring this concept in the pragmatic world, because the last 2 years made all of us working in this area to be very pragmatic, being a time of crisis. So for each of you, as an introductory remark, what would be the first very concrete step from each of your own points of view? What would be the first concrete step to move this healthcare system towards a more resilient status? And I'm going to start with Professor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I say hello to all the invited persons, and I send all my best wishes to Professor Monti. I remember a little that in the 90s, we introduced in Romanian at least a new word, was implementation. Until 1990, there was no implementation in Romania. Now we have resilience. So, to succeed with resilience, we need setting priorities, finding resources, human resources, and designing a plan in which we need implementation. So, implementation was before resilience. You see, in many international organisms like WHO, all the time we have something very interesting, like pandemic preparedness plan, which was approved by the World Health Assembly, I think in 2017 or 2018. And after this pandemic preparedness plan, very few countries started an approach to become resilient, because these kind of plans are those which brings to countries, to people, resilience of the health systems. So, but there were, I think Germany was in Europe at least, was the best resilient country during this pandemic. Of course, I came in Ministry of Health as Minister of Health. I was nominated 2 weeks ago, and now I have to find the right balance between to deal with the actual situation and to think a little how to build the resilience of the health system, which is very difficult because the same people, the same resources are to deal with the actual situation, and I have to do something to deal with this resilience of the health system. I think in Romania at least, what is the most important priority is to change the mentality in financing the health system. In fact, the type of functioning of the health system is very important. Look, we discuss, and I think one of the most important things for resilience is prevention. We discuss about prevention, I think, in the last 20 or 25 years, all the time. And there are very few real preventive measures which are functioning, really good functioning in Romania. So the first element we should think about is prevention and preventing thinking, because the preventive thinking will change the way in which we'll act to prepare the health system to the challenges it might appear. It is good that now at the European Union level, a body, for the moment, a small body, is developing. It's not an institution for the moment, it's a kind of a unit inside the European Commission. It's called HERA. And this unit, it's for intervention in public health emergency, not only in this pandemic, because this is a kind of mechanism in which European Union try to keep the things under control in crisis. So resilience means the functioning, the good functioning of the health system, and to have also special tools to act when we have such a crisis situation. And these two elements, you should find them at the EU level, but also in each country. And the change of thinking regarding the preventive behavior, preventive mechanism, it's also essentially, and I think this should be one of my main mission as long as I will be Minister of Health, and after that, because I am public health person, so I understand very well this mechanism.
So one first answer, a first concrete step would be to invest more resources and more attention on the preventive approach towards health in general and, of course, public health in particular. Professor Monti, please, the same question also for you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to take part in this very important Bucharest Forum, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, prevention, preventing thinking, preventive behavior is really a motto which should permeate of itself all the health policies for the future. And I would venture to say not just the health policies. One of the key considerations we present in our Pan-European Commission report entitled Drawing Light from the Pandemic, a new strategy for health and sustainable development, is in fact that health policies should gain a much more central position in the overall policy making by national governments, by regional organizations, and at the global level. In particular, we analyze how things could be improved by bringing in each government the health ministers and the finance ministers closer together. I have had some experience as head of government in Italy during another difficult time, not for health reasons, but for another kind of spread, the spreading of financial risks and the Eurozone crisis in 2011, 2012. And I remember well that in the working of the Council of Ministers in my government, the paramount role was held by the Economic and Finance Minister. And the health minister's position was an important one, a respected one, but not really at the center of strategic policy making. And we believe that this needs to be changed at all levels. And why does it need to be changed in particular at the national level? Well, because during each year's budgetary process, it's normal that considerations pertaining to budgetary constraints, nationally or under the EU rules, considerations pertaining to the many sources of public spending may win it over the health considerations. And health would gain a much, much more important role permanently if we are able to incorporate in the future formulation of policies and of financial policies the experience of this tragic pandemic, where we have seen not only the human tragedy, but also how devastating this pandemic has been for national budgets, for national economies, for even the conduct of economic policies. Just think how much the monetary policy of the ECB and of all other central banks around the world has had to be radically changed in order to accelerate the supply of money and financial resources to cope with the consequences of the pandemic. And now we see inflation coming up. Fiscal policies have also been radically redirected because of the pandemic. So, and this can be said for all aspects of economic policies. So I think that those who take care about financial, fiscal, and other economic policies will find it to be, even in their own sectoral interest, to give in the future, year after year, greater attention to the investments for health, for sustainable health systems, so that number one, the probability of health threats becoming health crisis is reduced. And secondly, even if they were to be materialized on certain occasions, their cost will be smaller because it will have been spread over the years, and the health systems will be found better prepared, better equipped when the difficulties come. And I would conclude this answer by saying that although most people will be interested in the preparation of health systems and preventions at the national level, the same thing needs to be done at the global level. And in particular, our Commission has issued a recommendation that has already been followed by the G20 under Italian presidency this year, which has decided to set up a G20 Health and Finance Task Board, precisely bringing together the health responsibilities and the finance responsibilities in each country. And this task force begins to operate now under the Indonesian G20 presidency, which has succeeded Italy on December 1st, and will bring on a more permanent basis to a dialogue between health and finance, so that not only the health systems, but the overall policy making of national governments and also of international bodies like the G20 will not be taken by surprise, as it has been the case this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. So we keep in mind an advice which we are, as a matter of fact, singing from many years, to see healthcare as an investment, not as a cost. Or maybe ideally to have health ministers more powerful than financial ministers. But of course, this is still a long way to go. Professor Rafila, did you have a very quick intervention?
Very quick intervention. Thank you, Professor Monti. Many of your ideas are also mine, but I want a small comment. We started in around 2000 with this concept, health impact assessment, which was not very well perceived by different politicians. Then we have all health in all policies, this next step. But it's very difficult to change the approach, not at only at country level, but also at international level. That we have two important engines. One is health, the other one is education. If we want to really to reach the UN Sustainable Development Goals in 2030, we have to apply this principle regarding the changing in perception and in decision regarding putting health in, I don't know if it is the main, but for sure it's one of the main elements that should be put in the center of the policies in general, because health policies are those which will offer to people the possibility to move towards development, a sustainable development of the society.
Thank you for this, Dr. Rășinar. How is this looks? How does this look from your industry perspective? The pharmaceutical industry was a key player in the last 2 years. So we are listening to you.
All right. How much time I have? All right. So let me go back to the very pragmatic comments that I have prepared for today. And as you were setting the scene, I will try to be as clear as I can. And thank you, Minister, for opening it up. It really raises to the things that I want to point out. I think that health and healthcare in general, and if I'm looking into the RPIMS, the Industry Association Barometru pentru Sănătate, the survey that has been run with the Romanian Academy recently, you will see that sănătatea, health and healthcare, is considered by the Romanian population as being the single most important attribute that matters. And this is a very significant change that we are seeing in the Romanian society. It has never been the case before. And that's a very significant reality. And if it's so important, I think it deserves, first of all, and I'm from a multinational background, it deserves a very strong plan that is coordinated, because a significant change can only happen if you manage to harmonize the efforts of a society like that. And then stay with me for a bit of a journey, okay? A plan like that needs an objective. And I would speculate a bit, but not that much. An objective might be that we change the clinical practice in Romania towards the European standard. Ideally, we have the European standard available tomorrow, but that's not possible. But it's possible that you plan the steps, and in a number of years, in some areas faster, in some areas later, you would be arriving there. Vaccination and the availability of vaccines was a very good example that people can rely to. Then you have a plan like that, and the plan like that would have a couple of steps, pragmatic ones. Short term, you can reallocate resources. For example, you have a significant capacity issue for chronic patients today because the attention is on pandemic, rightfully so. But what happens with myocardial infarctions? What happens with other patients that are not diagnosed? And then you have a capacity issue to deal with that. And you have a big population of family practitioners that can jump in and take that role and gain as an importance in the overall healthcare system. That would be one. Another one might be telemedicine that would also help the capacity, and other things that would be helping capacity in general. As a representative of the innovative industry, I have to say that another one which is short-term is make sure you have access to the most efficient treatments. And it's a balance, and the health assessment is very important. And HTA that the minister was commenting upon would make a difference and understand which one are more relevant than the others in the given context, but you cannot afford not to have the efficient solutions available. And then as you move into the medium, longer term, then, and you need to invest today, and you need to think and plan about for that today, screening and diagnostic education would be showing results, but even if we do prevention today, we will reap the benefits only in 10, 20, 30 years from now on. And that's right, and that's what we need to do. But we cannot expect immediate results with this kind of interventions. Last, I think, you know, everything that I have presented so far would be more like reactive measures, logical ones. But in reality, if we want to progress, we need to take a leapfrog. We need to be ahead. And for that, we need to nurture and coordinate innovation, I think. I think we need a state prioritization of innovation hubs, of innovation accelerators in healthcare, finding solutions elsewhere in the world or solutions that would be a good fit for the problems that we have here in Romania for the Romanian patients.
Okay, thank you. So what I keep from your remarks is that we need lots of coordination in order to move into the right direction, and to keep in mind that always we need to innovate if we want to really go forward, to have some frog leaps.
I think we need a plan, and I think that we need people and our leaders to communicate and keep us aligned to deliver that.
Thank you, Mr. Rădulescu. So Vodafone really had and still has a lot of presence in the healthcare area, mainly through some third sector organizations. So from your perspective, but also from the industry with the specific profile that you are coming from, how can we concretely go to this objective?
Thank you for inviting me first, and maybe some of the people here are questioning why am I here, because we have such distinguished guests, specialists and experts in the healthcare domain. There is, coming to your first question on resilience, there is a very important component in our opinion that has to play a role, or a much bigger role in the future, and that's technology. Technology already plays a big role in terms of, let's say, the medical part of technology, like research, medicine, vaccines, surgeries, and so on and so forth. But there is so much more than technology that technology can bring on the table that we have to explore. All the things that the distinguished guests here mentioned a bit earlier have to have something to do with technology. We cannot accelerate reforms, we cannot monitor patients remotely, we cannot work with significantly more data than what we had in the past without technology. We need to look at digitalization of public administration in terms of healthcare, of private administration, of connecting the dots in terms of the digital domain. We have to look at telemedicine. Telemedicine has many layers. It can be starting from remotely monitoring patients. And can we just imagine if we had something like that during the pandemic, how many lives maybe we would have been able to save? It can mean consultations, like live consultations, but that requires, because it's easy to think that you can have a tablet and a telecom connection, but it requires much more than that. Because to my humble opinion, there is no practitioner in this world that would give a medical advice without understanding a bit more about the patient. And therefore, access to the medical file of each and every one of the patient in a digital way, in a fast way, is essential to this. There are many other ways that technology can support and help, from simple asset tracking. We tend to think that administration is only, papers and so on. But imagine in hospitals what a big chaos can happen if nobody knew where the equipment is. There are many things, many sensors that can be added on top of the technology of the telecommunication layer. And one more thing that I would like to add for this phase of the discussion, let's not forget for a second that without telecommunications, which is the first layer of technology that we benefit of, and we take it as granted. Let us imagine where would have been the economy without us all being able to work remotely. And that is saying a lot about the resilience of what technology can provide to the society. And I'm absolutely convinced that in whatever shape or form of the plans that we need to have as a country, and that's been said here, we need to incorporate a lot of these technological advances, not only in the medical per se domain, which are already there and multinational companies, practitioners, hospitals need to have as tools, but rather what can come on top, and there needs to be a much better, let's say, collaboration between the two domains.
Thank you. So from this first intervention, what I understand that basically we have on the vertical two objectives, more prevention, not only putting words in there, but also some real resources. And this means that we have to understand it more as an investment. So let's not talk anymore about spending on prevention, but investing in prevention. And we can use two important resources here on the horizontal, technology and innovation, which were both very important during the last 2 years, at least in managing the pandemic. Now I want to go back to Professor Monti, because I think it would be very useful for all of us to hear briefly, because the time is not so generous with us in this panel, but briefly to hear more about the report that the Pan-European Commission that you are chairing prepared and recently published, that was in September. I read the document and it's a very detailed and interesting document. So first, what was it needed, this document? And secondly, in a nutshell, if you can tell us which are the main solutions in there.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is the rather short report. Why
always?
A rather short report, but I must say that there is also a much longer document called Review of the Evidence. It's a companion document, and each of the recommendations issued in the report finds its empirical basis in this accompanying document. So why? Well, it was the director of WHO European region, Hans Kluge, who had this idea, and he asked me to chair a commission of 19 personalities drawn from the 53 member states of the European region of WHO, an interdisciplinary composition with health experts, economists, but also politicians. There were 5 former heads of governments or heads of state, because the ambition that Dr. Kluge had was to try for a first time possibly to speak about health and health policies in a way that could be understood well also by different ministers in a government, not just the health minister or the health specialists, and even by heads of governments, because the purpose is to, as I said earlier, to raise the level of political attention on health policy. Now, this was done in 1 year of work, of course, all online. We were never able, not even once, to meet physically, given the conditions. And it has been published, presented to the member states of the WHO, and discussed in many, many different institutions and places. It was it comprises 5 main objectives, and each of the objectives is articulated in a number of recommendations. And for each of the recommendations, we try to indicate who should take care of that, by when, how, why, etc., etc. So just to give you an idea, the 5 key objectives, the 5 big objectives, sorry, not 5, the 7 big objectives are operationalize the concept of One Health at all levels. One Health is now being widely followed as a concept, but we rarely have drawn the concrete implications on how to organize health systems for the various aspects of the health, human, animal, plants, the health of the planet, etc. What should do the national governments, but also the UN? What should they do if they want to draw operationally all the benefits from the One Health approach? Then objective 2, take action at all levels of society to heal the divisions that the pandemic has exacerbated. So this is between health policy and social policy. Objective 3, support innovation for better One Health. This is along the lines that the representative of Vodafone just underlined rightly. Objective 4, invest in strong, resilient, and inclusive national health systems, and we try to indicate in which directions. But objective 5, we must also create an environment which enables the promotion of investment in health. For example, also the EU may wish to change its Stability and Growth Pact to make more room for the investment in health. And then quickly, the last 2 objectives have to do with international governance for health. One at the global level. The G20 proposal I mentioned enters in this objective, and the other one at the pan-European, at the level of the pan-European region. So we are seeing that this report begins to be actually used for policy purposes by national governments and internationally, and that was exactly the purpose.
For this briefly description, reading this document, Professor Rafila, I was kind of struck by the fact that for many of the objectives which were just mentioned by Professor Monti, one tool was keep popping there, like a tool to be used to touch those objectives. And this tool, it's a very well-known tool, evidence-based policy making and using hard facts and evidence in order to prioritize investments. Now, from my experience working with governments in many countries, I know that in this kind of settings, everyone is agree. But when we go to the real deal, things are not so easy, and sometimes there is lots of resistance from the healthcare professional leadership, from the political leadership to that. How do you think, we will have this kind of resistance here in Romania? What can we do to persuade leadership to use this tool?
I think everywhere in the world it's happening. We should somehow to measure the difference between countries and to change this interest-based policy making in evidence-based policy making. It's the human nature in many circumstances that opposed to evidence-based policy making. And here it's more difficult to change, but we should start from somewhere. Maybe this is the idea, to start from somewhere, at least to choose 1, 2, 3 points in which we'll take the decision based on evidence, not based on historical, because here in Romania we have this problem. We take decision based on the history, not the evidence. And I know the many health programs. I worked in the Ministry of Health starting in 2001, and the budgeting, the activities, the priorities were all time the same because historically they were the same and nothing changed. So we should start to change, to have some turning points maybe, to start to change in a few points. If you want to change in all of them, for sure will be a failure. So that's my intention, to find some points in which we can start building, because this should be the idea, to build based on evidence, to set priorities based on evidence, to finance that priorities based on evidence, and then we have a kind of pilot, if you want, and then to extend it to more and more activities.
What you're saying reminds me of that famous joke, you know, how do you call a person who hits several times the same wall and doesn't change her or his behavior? Maybe we should try to get out of that role. Thank you for a candid answer. Dr. Rășinar, also in the Pan-European Commission reports that Professor Monti talked about, it was mentioned this misalignment between incentives for innovation, misalignment among the public sector and the private sector. And there is lots of discussions here, sometimes even criticism. For instance, that report considers that the balance is tweaked in favor of the private sector, but in the same time we became aware of how useful and fruitful a public-private partnership can be. So what can be done in order to make this balance of incentives for innovation, to balance this field between the public and the private sector?
I think that the answer is already in what you just said. And the answer is partnerships. I think sitting at the same table with a win-win mindset, focused on the priorities, the public priorities, we're here. And we will be helping a lot. There is a lot of experience that have been gathered in innovation across the world. We don't have to reinvent, I mean, at least in majority of the cases. There would be maybe something that is specific for the Romanian environment, then you're happy looking into that. But otherwise, we just wait for an invitation and align on priorities. Would that be prevention? Would that be innovation? Would that be technology? We're here to help.
I would love to go into more detail and maybe talk a bit more about the transparency of this kind of public-private partnership. Maybe we should tackle this in the next meeting and next conference. Due to time reasons, I will go to Mr. Radulescu. I love that you mentioned technology like horizontal resource to be used. The issue here is that, of course, everyone talks about digitalization in the healthcare area, which is nice. But I don't know if you are aware, by quite recent publications, wrote by international healthcare leaders, saying that, and we also hear that from physicians and nurses working in hospitals, that sometimes this transition from a paper-based system to an electronic-based system puts a higher burden on the healthcare professionals, sometimes complicates their life, even if, of course, the objective is undoubtedly a good one. So can something be done in a country with Romania's resources, and I'm thinking again about the private sector, that we're going to shorten this transition in order also to reduce frictions? Because you know this is a very sensitive issue for many healthcare professionals in this country.
Clearly, I mean, there is no, let's say, gain without pain. There is definitely some sacrifice that all of us need to make in a transition to a better system, to a better environment.
But right now, we are kind of at the end of these 2 years, especially in the healthcare area, I mean, this would not fall well. We don't want to do many
Correct.
sacrifices.
But what I'm trying to say is that, and what I've heard so far, is that we need to start planning. Yeah, and planning right now is the key word. We need to get out a little bit about, you know, from these buzzwords. Yeah, one of the buzzwords in technology is digitalization. Everybody talks about it, very few know what it is. And how can it be actually applied in small companies, big companies, state-owned companies, etc., etc. I think from that planning phase, where we inevitably need to go, we, the technology providers, need to be onboarded as well. Why? Because if you plan it carefully, and if you embed this technology transition, which is again inevitable in my opinion, we can have a very good plan. Yeah? And any type of reforms, I'm not a specialist in, again, in the healthcare system, but any type of reform, no matter what they are, we need to incorporate technology, and even furthermore, within implementation, I heard Professor Afila talking about implementation. In implementation, technology can burn some stages. I take again the telemedicine solution because it's so simple to relate to. You know, if we could implement, how difficult would it be for all of us to reduce or to increase the ambulatory treatment in hospitals? It would be very difficult without having some technology attached to it, because that would mean preventing people from coming for anything in the ER and so on and so forth, and then burdening the system so much. But with some implementation, and if we do it right, monitoring patients, yeah, the first phase, just monitoring patients would add a first layer that would reduce already some level of burden. The next one would be access to telecommunication for those patients, especially for the ones that are in dire need of, you know, or have different levels of healthcare issues. Having access to their medical files by the practitioner, by the medics, by the doctors, specialists or generalists, is another layer that can add. All of this can be implemented, you know, relatively fast if we have the proper planning and we know which stage do we need to introduce what. Yeah. One more example I would like to give, and that is a bit outside the, and by the way, all of these technologies exist. It's not, we would not invent anything. Yeah, they exist. Some countries use it as we speak. Even in Romania, we have a telemedicine solution that we implemented through Vodafone Foundation for the neonatology section in Marie Curie. But we could only do as much. Yeah, it's a very small, but it exists and works. I would give you a very different example from education, because I see a lot of, you know, similarities in some way. When the pandemic started, basically everybody needed to stay at home, and basically all the pupils, all the students could not follow school other than online. And the first thing that, you know, we did as a country is to distribute tablets, connected tablets to these kids, yeah, basic. But there was no system of education that would have sustained the communication. There was no platform, nothing to support that. It solved only partly the problem, but a lot of other issues came out of it, because the quality of the educational act was reduced as much. And that's why I'm talking about planning. Yeah? That's why I'm talking about we need to think where and how do we need to introduce in terms of technology.
Okay, thank you. We are, gentlemen, we are at the end of our panel. I want to congratulate you because I think that until now we never pronounced this bad, ugly word called COVID, which is it's a good success, it's a good start. But I don't want us to end before asking you to answer very briefly, maybe using maximum 3 words to this question. And this time I will leave Professor Rafila the last one to answer this question, just to give him time to think, considering his very visible public position. And I'm just gonna invite Professor Monti. So what's the most single important lesson that you learned following this COVID pandemic? If you can use as brief answer as possible, 2, 3 words.
Be ready.
Be ready. Good one. Thank you. Dr. Rășina.
We win together.
We win together. Mr. Radulescu.
Technology is amazing.
You didn't have too much time to think?
No. Anyway, solidarity and coordination.
Okay. So on this note, I want to thank all of you again, and I want also to thank the audience, and have a nice lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.